Hey, 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 how you doing? Welcome, everyone. If you're joining us here live, thank you for being here. If you're watching this after the event, I super appreciate it as well. You're all super welcome. And I'm going to be riffing here a little bit on how to get more from your man. And as always, I will be doing question and answer. And so if you have a question, please give it to me and I'll try and get to it, and I will go through questions in order. So if you have a question, the sooner that you get your question in, the sooner that I can try and get it answered. So also, if you're joining us live, feel free to let me know who you are, where you're from, and just how you're doing. What's up? How are you? Feel free to just put that in the comments box. I'm actually here gonna put my first comment in to welcome you all. And I'm going to throw that up here on the screen. So I wanted to talk today about how to get more from your man, because I've spent a lot of time, for those of you that have been with me, both in uploaded videos and live streams, I spent a lot of time talking about he's not your guy, or how to know if he is your guy. And that's super important because it's so easy to invest a whole lot of time and energy into something that isn't really going to go somewhere. And it's easy to invest energy in something that's not investable and then experience heartbreak and disappointment and confusion. So I've been trying to be a force of sobriety, if you will, to help people not experience that by saying, let's get really curious about if this is actually your guy. But I also wanted today, for those of you that have a connection with a guy, maybe there's a guy in your life right now, maybe you've come out of a connection, I wanted to talk a little bit about how to get more from your man, how to have a guy show up for you more, not from a place of, is your worth a question, is your value a question, but just more how to understand guys a little bit more so you can align more and actually get more from the interaction. So hello to those of you that are commenting here right now. Jax Gaming, good afternoon. Hi to Two-Win. Beatrice, yeah, finally get to see you live from Los Angeles. Awesome. I hope you're all doing well. Feel free to let me know if you have questions. Give us a question and I will try and get it answered, and I will come to questions in the order that they are given to me. So it's great to see more of you joining here live. I'm really excited to be here with you, and I hope that I can give you some value today. Hello to Krista and hello to Cassandra. Thanks for joining us. So just some ideas here about how to get more from your man. And I'll share some of this also just from personal experience of being a guy, that when we've got a lot on, oftentimes as guys, we're not so good at really getting vulnerable with what's going on for us emotionally. And one of the things that I hear commonly from women is, how do you get a guy to open up? How do you get a guy to want to share his innermost self with you? And one of the things that you can do is to get really attuned to when is a guy actually available and present to you. How able are you to recognize if a guy is available and present to you? Now, this helps if the guy cares about presence, perhaps has a spiritual practice, meditates, that he kind of wants to show up and be present. But a lot of times I hear things where what I'm experiencing is you might be trying to connect with a guy when he's not really in a great place to be connected with. And therefore he's not that available, or he's not that likely to want to drop in deep with you. He's in a bit more of his problem solver, fixer mode, right? Solutions orientation. So one of the things you can start to notice is just be a study of when is a good time to try to connect with him more deeply. A lot of guys benefit from having an upfront agreement, like, hey, we're going to go on a date tonight, or I'm going to take you out, or we're going to drop in later. Most guys, I think, do better when they know that there's something like that they can kind of prepare for, than sort of feeling like they're being blindsided or asked to go into territory that they don't want to. You can also just get curious to ask your guy, hey, is there anything that really supports you wanting to talk more or kind of go deeper? Like, you can actually ask him directly. There might be some things he knows about that he would welcome your curiosity, or that you can just be a study. What we're trying to avoid is this subjectification, right? Which is a bit of a fancy word, but it basically means we're trying to avoid you imagining that he's more like you than he actually is. And so that the things that have you want to share and open up aren't necessarily the things that have him want to share and open up. So you basically start with a blank page and become a student and get curious about there's another human being over there that has different needs, wants, and motivations. And what would have them really want to open up, right? And for a lot of guys, it's that there's a time and a place for that, right? You know, the sort of old, kind of not great adage that says, you know, when it comes to sex, a guy just needs a place, doesn't necessarily need a reason. Now, I don't think that's anywhere near the fullness of the truth for a lot of guys, but there's something that's a reverse of that in this situation, that actually a guy might need more of a time, a place, and a reason to want to open up. And he's going to want to feel safe in the same way that you might want to feel safe. But perhaps it's a little easier for you sometimes to go there. Like for him, as guys, we often say this, it's not necessarily the territory that we're in all the time, day in, day out with our guy friends. Like typically when guys get together, they might talk about a lot of things. Then they might drop in, say something a bit deeper. Then they might drop back out and they start talking about sports again, or they start talking about politics or business or whatever their investments, whatever their kind of motorbikes, whatever their go-to things are. But it's not like they just naturally stay down in a kind of deeper territory. And you might be more used, perhaps with your girlfriends, to being more emotionally connected in that way ongoingly. So it might be something that you need to drop the script and ideas that he's withholding from you, or if there's any kind of judgment in there on him, or that he should be doing something that he isn't currently doing, and just getting curious if, as a different human being, what he needs to want to go in that space might be different than what you need. And for him, it might be less of an automatic need to want to go into that space. But it's worth persevering, because that's one of the reasons that guys really want relationship, actually, is that it is a place that they can be deeper, more real, and more emotionally expressed. It's just we don't always know the pathway there ourselves. Sometimes we need to be led a bit. Sometimes we need to be given an invitation that we can step into and participate. So let me just flick back here, say a few hellos to people. We have a lot of people join us. Hello to Krista, Cassandra, Diana. Bonjour, I appreciate that. Evie, Victoria, Paula, Queen Introvert, like it. Yukilana, Stephen, welcome. Welcome, Lisa. And got a question here from Karena. How can you tell the difference between a rough patch or the sign of the end? Yeah, that's a really good question. I think partly that depends on the container that you're in with someone, right? So if you're in the container of, we actually have a commitment, like a marriage commitment or something that we really want to see rough patches through, and we get that the rough and the smooth is part of the territory of a long-term relationship. So I'm curious what your particular context might be. One of the things that I think is really important is that you can find ways, even if this is really, really difficult, to still be able to hear each other. If that ongoingly is never happening, that sometimes can signal the beginning of the end, because there's almost like, you know, John Gottman, the marriage researcher, talks about the ability to give and receive influence as one of the most important things in relationship. And if you've basically lost that ability to give and receive influence from each other, now we're in pretty difficult territory. I think before you decide that is the end, I think it can be really good to get some support professionally. And even the desire to get that professional support can sometimes show where someone's intentions are for the relationship. I'd also look and notice, you know, where are you in terms of your own resentment and anger? Because so often those can be underneath a desire to end a relationship. And it might be that there are ways that those things can actually be addressed, or that they haven't yet been fully heard. You know, so really, if we're stepping into the territory of ending a relationship, we want to do our best to make sure that we're seeing it accurately, which means that we're not in some story about the other person, that we don't just have a sort of laundry list of unmetabolized feelings and complaints, that we're actually processing what is real for us about the relationship, getting support on it, and maybe having some of our views and opinions about the relationship checked and challenged, right? Whenever we get up into our own heads, or we get fixated on our own experience, or we're having a hard time in a relationship, it's so easy, and I can hold myself up and say, hey, I do this sometimes, to just get over here with me and my experience and the things that I'm struggling with, and kind of forget, yeah, but actually there's another human being over there that's having a very different experience. And I don't really understand maybe why we're having this different experience, or I don't really understand them enough to know, oh, they're this kind of person, and that's why I'm walking away from the relationship. So another way of talking to what I'm saying right now is it kind of depends on the consciousness within which the relationship is constellated. If you get that as partners, we are here to trigger one another, we're here to try and heal our wounds from our upbringing, but those wounds are sometimes going to be loud and messy, that I get that I'm giving you permission to show me the places I need to be healed. If that's the container, oftentimes people have a very different answer to a rough patch, because a rough patch might be, yeah, I'm getting triggered all the time, and this is showing me where I'm not healed, and it's really rough and tough, but I kind of get that this is what I want, because in the fullness of this is my ability to love, my ability to be healed, my ability to be myself, my ability to be a good partner. If we don't have that context and we're more judging the relationship from, does it feel good right now, then we may have a different answer to a rough patch, because we're not so up for it doesn't feel good, or I feel triggered, or I feel limited. So said differently, this is kind of invitation for any of us here right now to notice, what is the kind of relationship that we want to have? What is the kind of consciousness of that relationship? And are we really seeing love and being in relationship with someone as, one, showing us where we're wounded and need healing, and two, that we're in for the long haul to learn how to love better, right? Because a lot of being in a long-term relationship isn't just about, what can I get from it? It's actually about, how can I learn to love someone who is effectively an alien to me, right? Who's effectively foreign, because when I really get that there's another person over there with different views, motivations, ways of constructing reality, their own past, their own wounds, then I can get curious about, wow, actually what I thought relationship was about and what it might actually be about can be two different things. Sometimes, and again, I just hold my hand up and own this myself, my view of relationship has been the stumbling block. My view of what it should look like, or whether it should look like what I grew up with, or different than what I grew up with, or whether it should feel good in certain ways, or whether I should be loved in certain ways. There can be some quite naive, I think, perceptions that we hold culturally at large about what a relationship in the fullest sense is really about. So I hope that's useful. Got another question here. Can you describe what a traditional and unconventional relationship would look like? So I don't use that language of unconventional relationship that much. So I'd be curious if there's anything that you mean by that. When I talk about a traditional relationship, I mean a relationship that is forged in a more traditional view of reality. And the traditional view of reality values tradition, honor, family, normally religion of one description or another. It's typically a much more kind of conservative view of reality. And, there's a view that marriage is probably for life, and that your family probably has quite a big say in who you might decide that you want to share your life with. The relationship in that context is more about, perpetuating family and inheritance and tradition and sort of furthering the culture that you grew up with. And I might distinguish that from what I would call a modern or postmodern view of relationship, which is much more, modern view of relationship is much more like, can we play together? Like, do we have lifestyles and careers and desires that match? Can we pay a mortgage together? Can we raise a family together? Can we travel the world together? It's a little bit more like, I have a game plan, and can we fit in with each other's game plan? And then the postmodern view of relationship is something like, I want a conscious relationship. I want to do inner work with you. Can we grow together? Can we heal each other? There's a little bit more desire to do the kinds of work that, this sort of YouTube channel community might be oriented to. And each of those approaches has pros and cons. The difference might be, or the difficulty might be, when you're trying to relate and you kind of have your dominant paradigm is very different than your partner, right? So if I were in a traditional paradigm where I'm very much about, till death do us part, and that this is really about two families kind of marrying together, and we want to grow have a family together and we want those kids to be grown in a very kind of traditional way, and you're very much about authenticity and self-expression and radical self-expression, or just being yourself, that those are just different scripts, and pros and cons in both of them. What is most important, I think, for a relationship is that deeper structure, traditional, modern, postmodern, in the way that I'm talking about it, is that you're somewhat aligned there. It's quite hard to have, I think, a long-term relationship across a sort of different worldview about the deeper structure of what a relationship is. Probably not impossible, but just much harder and probably much less fulfilling for most of us. Now, normally this sorts itself out in dating, because if you're a very sort of evolutionary progressive type, you don't tend to go for someone who's, all about traditions. But I've also seen it, and I've also seen it where maybe people's family have a very traditional view of relationship, and they have a much more self-expressive view of relationship, or a much more postmodern view of relationship, and it's really difficult. It's just difficult. It's not easy to reconcile across those things. So feel free to share any more context if that's relevant for you about what an unconventional relationship looks like. All right, thanks for the question. Hello, welcome to those of you that joined us. How about a video titled Single During the Coronavirus Outbreak? Yeah, I like that. That's a good title. There are quite a few people that have been talking to that. I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have. Let me put this up. Jack, please help. And I'm an impasse with my guy. I'm learning to longboard and had an issue today with being in the way of a bike rider. I tried to move but couldn't, so stopped in my tracks. He is saying I was not courteous, and we fought, even left and came home where we're barely speaking. Okay, so we could take a few different views of this, right? If I wanted to be a little bit more sort of in my coach hat, I would say, great, okay, you guys have hit a snag, you've hit a trigger, and probably your defenses have gotten activated. Maybe there's some wounding that's getting activated. From one level, that is great. That's one of the reasons that we want to be in relationship. We don't want a relationship that is just a complete harmonious, steady state. Why? Because normally those relationships aren't metabolizing conflict, and therefore they don't last, right? That there's sort of all harmony, no truth isn't the answer. So what's probably happened here is one or both of you has gotten activated, triggered, and defended. And our job is to start to identify, mostly for ourselves, right? Ideally, we might have a partner that does this for themselves, but start over here. What's actually really going on for me? What is getting activated here? What defense am I deploying, right? Defenses could look like this is my defense, right? I kind of withdraw. So I tend to want to distance and tend to want to kind of come back to myself. And there can be something good about that, but that is effectively one way of defending ourselves, is we withdraw. Some of us come on strong, right? We get dynamic in our defense. Hey, I want to talk with you. We've got a problem. Let's duke it out. Let's find out what's here. I also have some of that defense that I can deploy as well. So all of this to say, the job is not to have those things. The job is to work out, okay, we are going to have these things. That is human. What is that pointing to that we might need to resolve and repair for us, right? And sometimes there are good things worth fighting for. Like you have a different view of money, or you have a different view of how you spend your free time, or you have a different view of how much time you want to be in connection, or how family fits into your life, or friends, or it can be all sorts of things that are worth the conflict to actually find a better position. Really what we're trying to do, and in this context of how to get more from your man, is that you want to find as much place of alignment that you can, like a good negotiation where it's like, how can I include your view and my view, and together we're weaving a better view of reality. Like there's more truth that can get metabolized, because I know that you're bringing something to the table, and you know that I'm bringing something to the table. One of the best ways to do this is to find ways to be able to listen to each other. And so if you haven't, I encourage you to explore witnessed monologue, which is one person witnessing and the other person talking, monologuing. So there's only one person talking. And this person that's witnessing, your job is just to hear as best you can. And as much as you can, you're listening from the place of, let me try and understand you, not I'm listening to me. Again, I hold my hand up. This can be hard to do. So I'm listening to me is whenever you say something, I'm validating it, cross-checking it against, is that true in my experience? Or I don't buy your version of reality, or you're distorting right now. You're not really telling it straight, right? And as much as possible, we want to drop the internal noise and just provide a space for the other person to talk into so that we can really get them. And we don't have to agree, but we really want to get where they're coming from, get their experience, validate their feelings, know that it's okay for you to have a very different experience than me. Because why? That's called being human. That's called it's happening all the time, always anyway. So why don't we be in the truth about it, that a lot of the time we're not going to be having the same experience. And if we can really get into that program, right, the fancy phrase for that is individuation or differentiation. If we get that we're differentiated human beings having different experiences, now I can get much more curious about, well, what's going on over there with this other person who's actually got a very different sense of what might be important or what's going on. And let me just give them a good listening to. If you can both give each other a good listening to, even if you don't actually shift your particular view, it can be powerful. And normally you will shift your view a little bit because you're like, oh, okay, I assumed that you did that because you were upset with me. But actually what I'm hearing is you did that because you were stressed about some work project, or you were trying to act on the thing that I asked you to do the other day. You're trying to act on it, but now you've created this other problem for me that we didn't foresee. So oftentimes, if you can start with how did I show up in this situation, and how can I own that, right? So maybe I was short with you, maybe I was critical to you, maybe I deployed one of my defenses, maybe I overreacted. And if you can own that and reveal and be vulnerable with that, maybe there's an apology. Even if you didn't start the thing, even if it wasn't your fault, oftentimes if you can do that, it starts you coming towards one another. And then maybe they can own their part of the equation. Where it doesn't go so well is when we start over there and we start with all the things that the other person was doing that we didn't like. And now they don't feel heard and seen, and they don't feel validated in their experience. And now we're still in this standoff and that we're barely speaking. The other thing I'll say is that oftentimes in relationship, we could talk about fusers and isolators, right? So fusers tend to want to get closer, and isolators tend to it's almost like anxious and avoidant. And oftentimes our partner has a different thing than us, right? So when we rupture, what do you need? Do you need to kind of get close and try and repair quickly? Or do you try and get distance and kind of regulate yourself? And if your partner's doing the opposite thing than you, don't just assume that they're doing it maliciously or even unconsciously. It might just be that their way of feeling safe or their way of learned behavior for what they do in rupture is different than yours. And again, getting curious about that and being able to name, actually, when we rupture, I need to try and repair it quickly. That's important to me. That can be really good for an isolator to hear, right? And a fuser, someone that wants to get close, might need to hear, actually, I just need to take 30 minutes sometimes just to calm my system down. And then I can come back into contact with you. So you can start to set up some mini kind of agreements with one another that might have you ultimately repairing. Repair is, I think, the name of the game for most of us. Not that we don't have these arguments, not that we don't fight. It's that we can actually get stronger through them rather than just get further apart. So thank you for that question. Let me switch back here. All right, question from Lieben. Why does a guy play games but tell you he loves you and make you feel not like a priority? It's a good question. I'm sure a lot of people can relate to that. So there's a few ways that I want to take this question, right? I want to start with the end bit first because this gets talked about a lot. So he makes you feel that you're not a priority, right? So a couple of things with that. One is he making you feel that way, or are you feeling that way in response to your interpretations of some of his behaviors? So ideally, in this sort of authentic experience orientation, you don't make me feel something mostly. And I own that I feel this way. I feel disappointed, or I feel underappreciated, or I hurt. And we get a little distance from it's the other person doing it to us, right? So you might be having the experience, I don't feel like a priority. You could own that experience. You could bring that experience with some vulnerability to him. Like, what do you feel when you don't feel a priority, right? Maybe you feel sad, or maybe you feel resentful and angry. But there might be a part in there where you just feel hurt and sad. And if you can start to bring some of that, and not just the sense that he's doing something wrong, it might be easier for him to hear that and to maybe do something different. Now, there's another piece about this priority, because not every guy has relationship as his top priority. And most guys that are in their masculine essence won't necessarily have it as their top priority. It might be that it's alongside their work priorities. It might be that their mission in the world is their main priority, and relationship sits as a lower priority. And sometimes I'm just saying that so that we can get in touch with reality that not every guy is going to make a relationship his priority, and you might prefer the guy that doesn't actually make it a priority. You might just want that he makes it enough of a priority that you can feel connected to him and that the relationship matters to him. But it might not be that you put the same kinds of investment all the time into the relationship. Or it might be you want to get curious about each other's experience, because he may be showing up for certain things in a relationship that, because it's not what you show up for or what you value, it's harder to see, right? So that can sometimes be a thing that we actually just prioritize different things, a bit like love languages, right? You need words of appreciation. I need physical touch. You need good actions and deeds. I need words of appreciation. We're kind of missing each other. So when you're having the experience, I don't feel like I'm a priority, what do you do in that situation? Because sometimes we might go a bit automatic pilot, right? And we start to run the I feel disrespected, insulted, not seen, not appreciated sort of script. And that may be something that is actually yours to heal as well. Because I don't feel valued and I don't feel appreciated. It's not just a guy's responsibility to fix that, right? Ideally, if he's a good partner to you, he's going to care about that, and he might, make adjustments or attune to you and help you. But there's also going to be some of your inner work in there as well, probably around, what happens when I feel undervalued and underappreciated? Do I kind of lose myself? Do I start to question who I am? Like what sort of happens there? There's basically a kind of freedom you might be able to get if you're also willing to include that you not feeling like a priority may not just be about him. There may be a bunch of you in there, and that's the stuff you can control. You can't really control him. You can just decide, is this a good person for me to partner with? And can we give each other deeper respect and appreciation and make adjustments so that we're receiving and giving influence from one another? Now, the other bit you started this with is he's playing games. And I'm curious, if a guy's really playing games with you, like he's hot, he's cold, he's in, he's out, he's interested, not, he's probably not your guy. And that might be a little tough to realize, but that might be the ultimate freedom in this, is realizing, normally when a guy is really your guy, he doesn't play games. That's not the dominant place that the relationship constellates. The other thing about playing games is this sort of curiosity. Am I objectifying the guy? Am I imagining that he's doing certain things? If I did them, I would really be playing games, but maybe his motivation is different. So I always just invite a curiosity and minimal assumptions about what the other person's doing. But game players don't generally become your guy, in my experience. I hope that's helpful. Hi, Jack. Love your videos and finally caught a live chat. Awesome. How do I get more, I think, out of a man who acts distant, writes when he likes, calls when he likes, long distance relationship? Well, firstly, I just want to say to you, my heart goes out to you, because long distance relationship, I have been there and it can be really difficult. So I often say that the stakes are higher in long distance relationships because we don't have the advantages of nervous system proximity, right? The ways that we can naturally feel supported and regulated and seen just because we are in close physical proximity. So in some ways the bar's set higher, and I'm a fan of sort of stress testing long distance relationships, as in trying to get to the point of, are we really investing in this or are we not? So if we need to spend a lot more time together to find out whether we want to invest, let's be doing that investment decision rather than over a long period of time trying to make long distance relationship work, because I just think it's a lot harder than the other route. So what I hear in here is that you might have a request of him, which might be something like, is it possible for you to call me once a week or twice a week, or is it possible for us to have a set time when we talk? And I'm curious what his authentic response to that is, right? Because what we don't want to have is like a covert request that we're never making explicit, that then easily turns into a demand, or like you've done something wrong. So I'm curious if you've actually brought that to him as a request. Ideally, you want a guy to call you. Why? Because he actually wants to call you, not just because you want him to call you. Right? Most of us, that's what we want. We want the actual person to be like, yeah, my authentic desire is I want to speak to you right now. Let's get on the phone. So what I guess I'm hearing in this is possibly there's more connection that you want than you're getting. Curious if you guys have really explored that. Curious if the long distance relationship format is going to work for you kind of over the longer term, whether you're really in. Sometimes if a relationship's really in and then we have to do long distance because you got a job on an oil rig, that's a little different. But trying to build the base of a relationship ongoingly long distance, I'm not a super fan of. So it might be that you guys need to have a bit of a heart-to-heart, authentic conversation about, well, what is this and what do we really want and can we provide that? All right. Corinna says, thanks, Jack, for your eloquent answers. I'll need to process and digest your thoughts. I'm here to raise my consciousness for sure. Awesome. Yeah, well, feel free to loop back. If anything comes up in the next hour or so while we're here, then put it back in the question, because I'm happy to deepen these on the basis of you processing what I'm saying. Claire says, I met a man online 3 weeks ago and we've gone on 6 dates. He brings up in conversation from time to time if I'm seeing anyone else while seeing him. Is this controlling at all? It's a good question. So, number one, what is your authentic experience? Regardless of some generalizable standard, I'm imagining that you might be feeling a little controlled by hearing that question. Is that right? So step number one is just own your experience. Like, I'm feeling controlled, if that's true for you. Dating is a little bit the Wild West. We don't really have a rule book and a set of agreements. I think we just have ways of kind of coming into more mutual shared reality. And so one of those areas is often around, are we seeing someone else? And sometimes the question can be a little bit of a distraction if what you're looking for is a committed relationship, and if you're interested in that kind of relationship, possibly with the person in front of you. So said differently, if I'm really interested in you, I don't probably mind too much if you're asking me about whether I'm dating someone else. I might be much less open to that question if in my heart of hearts, I'm like, well, I don't really see something evolving here. So now that feels a little bit like it's denying me my freedom. So the second place I'd look is, where do you actually stand vis-a-vis this guy? Okay, so you've only met 3 weeks ago, 6 dates. Maybe you don't know, but 6 dates is also a bunch of information. You can also, if you don't want to answer that question, the authentic thing might be to say, oh, my reality is that you and I are dating. I don't actually feel super comfortable sharing that, or I'm happy to say I'm not yet ready to be in an exclusive relationship with you. So there might be a way that you can answer this, which is actually kind of true to you. I don't think just the asking of that question is necessarily controlling. I think sometimes we just kind of want to know where we stand. It might be insecurity. It might be, hey, I'm actually really into you, and I don't even know if you're into me at all. And so I'm going to ask you if you're seeing other people. It might be that from his side, an even more authentic way of saying it is, wow, I notice I'm developing feelings for you, and I'm starting to imagine that maybe at some point you and I might be exclusive. Maybe that's in there. But I don't think there's too much danger in clarifying those things. You don't have to go into a huge amount of detail, but like, yeah, I'm seeing other people, or no, I'm not, or no, I don't feel comfortable asking that. Because the closer we are in our realities, generally the better we are. Right? Where dating gets into most issues, from what I see, is when people start to develop very different realities, and then suddenly one is like, oh my God, you're seeing other people? That's ridiculous. Like, we were sleeping together on the weekend. I assumed because we slept together that we were exclusive. So ideally we want, again, minimum assumption and maximum curiosity. All right, hello, welcome. We've got more people joining us. Thank you for being here. This is a kind of Ask Me Anything. We have a theme today, how to get more out of your man or a man in your life. So let me know if you've got any questions that relate to that. I will answer the questions in the order they come. So if you've got a question, get it in sooner than later. White Rose Angel, yay, it's the best male relationship coach on YouTube. Hopefully you're staying well and steadfast. Well, that is very sweet. Thank you. I am staying well, and I do feel steadfast. So I appreciate that. Queen Introvert says, spot on, Jack. You hit the nail on the head there. The context for the question is lengthy. My partner has Indian origins, although he's raised in the Western world. He has strong shared values. As his family, I was raised in the Western world too, but that's been generational on my origins. I'm a very free-spirited person who lives life through being authentic with values. Yeah. In what's true to myself, I find our values can butt heads. Totally. I totally get it. And that is a very common thing in my experience, where people have perhaps transplanted from a culture that is a little different to, I'm going to be talking in gross generalizations here, so forgive me for any lack of cultural sophistication. But if I just say Western values at large, and that's kind of contentious what Western values are, but let's just imagine that there's something that we cohere around, that they are different values, and trying to relate across different value sets like that can just be really difficult. That's not to say don't do it. It's just to acknowledge, yeah, at times you're going to probably have mismatched values. The answer in some ways can be what is kind of like an integral move. Like in the integral view of reality, we try to metabolize more values. And that's a bit of a fancy phrase, but it basically means learn that you don't yet value so much. So let's say that you have a real value on being free-spirited, but I have a real value on tradition. Like, can we learn to embrace more values, so that when I say, hey, let's go to church on Sunday, you're like, oh, I get what you're honoring there and I can align with that. Or when you're saying, hey, let's go, skinny dip naked, I can be like, okay, that's not what I'd normally do, but I get that there's a value there called being free spirited that I can start to value, or however that would play out for you. So sometimes these things can be really rich opportunities for our own values development. Rather than having a view of saying, well, these are my values and I want to keep my values and I don't want to expand them. It's sort of like wow, how can I have my values and keep on learning and growing? But that doesn't mean that it's a very easy place necessarily to constellate a relationship. All right, let's pull up a new question here. Karen says, hi, I really appreciate the content you put out. You're welcome. Testing my scrolling skills here again. Things move about as more comments come in. Thumbs up. People get off chat for a second to give the man a thumbs up. Awesome. I appreciate that. Yeah, if you're liking this, or you like my channel, or you like something about me, give this video a thumbs up. It will help us get the word out to more people. I do appreciate that. And feel free to consider, if you haven't, you can support the channel. You can go to any video on my channel, and there's a PayPal link there that allows you to support the channel. All right, thanks, White Rose. Jack, this is from Ukalana. How to keep my head cool and not give in to the temptation to sleep too early with a man I'm reconciling with? Also, how do you make sure he doesn't think I don't want him because he gained weight? Okay, so for the second one of those things, I would risk having an authentic communication that actually just says something about that somewhat explicitly and sensitively. And you might not necessarily have to mention the weight in that. You might just say, hey, I want you to be really clear that the reason I'm getting back with you is XYZ, just so it's not left to the imagination. How do you not give into the temptation to sleep too early with a man you're reconciling with? I know that can be really hard. If you are actually bonded with someone and then it's kind of ruptured and you're trying to come back together, it can be really hard, because I think the nervous systems and the parts of you that are still bonded, it's like there's a real neural pathway that's in there. So I would just say, don't be too hard on yourself. Sometimes if that energy is almost so strong and loud, sometimes it might be better that it gets expressed in certain ways than you're just, you're kind of sitting on it and it's not really allowed to move through you, so to speak. So I wouldn't necessarily be too hard on yourself. It doesn't necessarily mean that if you go down that route that you have to agree to anything else in the future. Or it might be that you decide to meet only in external locations, right? So you're having these reconcile conversations in the cafe, in the library, in the public square, so to speak, so that it's not like, oh, we're doing it on my couch, where historically when we were emotional with one another, we would then kind of start to be intimate or something like that. So I would keep on neutral ground if in doubt. All right, DP says, me and the guy I'm interested in have met a few times at parties where he plays music. He contacted me first to befriend me on Facebook and also after every party. Should I initiate contact now? Okay, so I'm a fan of what's your authentic desire. And if your authentic desire is you want to initiate some contact, why don't you do that? Maybe the fear is if you do that you kind of want him initiating, perhaps, and you don't want to kind of steal his thunder or have the wrong energy there. And if it's just true that you want contact, you can give him a green light, you can give him a like, you can give a thumbs up, you can say, hey, would you be interested in getting together? Doesn't necessarily mean that you have to be the one that's fully initiating the plan, but it's sort of like, yeah, I mean, wanting to connect is a precious thing. I would encourage you to own that as best you can. Right Rose says, I'm about 99% done. This is the long distance relationship. It's exasperating. Cannot do a one-way relationship. It's not a relationship, lot of love. Do you offer individual coaching? I'm sure you have courses you offer. Okay, good question. So yes, I do offer individual coaching. And basically at the moment with my full-time clients, like people who work with me over a period of 3 to 6 months or more, I'm full with that, but I do have some people that will be ending. But I do offer one-off kind of relationship diagnostic and strategy sessions where we get on the phone either for an hour or an hour and a half. And if you're interested in that, the best thing to do is actually just to shoot me an email. I'll put my email in here now. It's jack@being jackbutler.com, or you can send me a DM on Instagram and I can let you know how that works and we can get something on the calendar. I don't do a lot of those slots, so it's sort of like first come, first serve when I have them, but the best way is to be kind of in the system with me. And if you think that you might be interested in a more serious coaching relationship where we kind of dive in together for several months, I'm just putting the link, jackbutler.com/apply. That's my coaching application. You can make an application and I come to those in a first come, first serve way. And the other thing I'll mention is that next month I am going to be launching a new program, completely new program, which is going to be working with me online over a period of 8 to 12 weeks. And if you're interested in that, just keep your ears pricked, your eyes peeled, because new information will be coming out about that in the next couple of weeks. So I'd love to have any of you that want to do deeper work with me start thinking about that, because I think it's going to be an exciting opportunity. All right, let's get a new question here. By the way, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate that people are joining on Sunday afternoon if you're on a kind of US, Canada, Mexico, South America time zone. I also know there's some of you that are tuning in from Europe, and I know that it's really late there. So I'm happy to be communing with you and that you're giving some of the final moments of your day to this. All right, let's find a new question here. Can you get a masculine man while I'm 31? Yes, I think so. I think masculine men exist at all ages. I think there's if you want something that's a little bit more philosophical about that, I think there's a move that sometimes culture makes. So in Western culture, I think we are learning how to include more feminine values than historically, right? So probably most of the men that, like, you know, my generation, let's just say plus or minus 10 years, probably they have a bit more space in their life to be connected to some of their emotions than maybe our great grandfathers did, right? Or maybe the generations that went off and fought in the world wars. So I think that's a great opportunity. And there's also a kind of masculine man that sometimes exists on the other side of that, which is, yeah, I've learned how to get in touch with a lot more of my feminine, and I'm a masculine essence man, and that's what I'm in touch with as well. So you might want a guy that can actually do both, right? If a guy can only be in his masculine and never be in his feminine, you might find that some of the deeper work that you want to do together isn't necessarily available to him. But if you want a purely masculine man, I would encourage you to date in a traditional context, right? What I was saying earlier about traditional, modern, postmodern, because a traditional man is sort of like, no, a man is a man. It's a biological fact. There's a role that I play, I provide and I protect, and that's kind of what I do. But I'm probably not going to be going to therapy with you. I'm probably not going to be doing deeper types of inner work and exploration, because that's not just really what I do. You know, I can fix your car, I can bring home the paycheck, I can show up awesomely and consistently, but I'm not necessarily going to be in like sort of deeper types of heart territory with you necessarily. I'm not going to be unpacking and processing. That's just not really part of the equation. So that's just a bit of a nuance on that question. But yeah, I think masculine men exist at all ages and stages, so to speak. Welcome. We've got some new people joining. Welcome to Vancouver Island. Stella says, hi, Jack. Totally love all your videos. What does it mean when a guy asks when my birthday? We're supposed to meet up for the first time, but couldn't because of coronavirus. I don't know. I mean, I'm just going to shoot from the hip. So it could be that he's interested enough that he wants to track that. So that might be something that he's going to put in his calendar. And if you guys happen to still be connecting, that he kind of knows that about you. It could be that he's into some kind of, you know, astrology or human design or some kind of system where he wants to know when your birthday is, because he's actually going to use that information to kind of work out a little bit more who you are. I don't know if guys do that quite as much. I've definitely had in the past in my dating life had women do that with me and then kind of come back with, well, here's what my astrologer thinks of you. And I'm like, I guess that's good. You know, I guess that's more information. You could also ask me about me. That would be good as well. So I'm not sure, but I'm a fan, again, just to bring this back to like a teaching point. Whenever a guy says something to you and you're trying to work out what does it mean, right? There's a couple options that we can pursue. One is it doesn't really mean that much, or there's no specific meaning that we need to attach to it, right? So sometimes, and this might be more true on average of women than men in relationship, that there's a sort of fascination with a lot of the details, and he said this, and why did he say that, and he thought this, but why did he then say this? And a lot of energy can go into trying to figure a guy out. And I don't know if that's always great investment of energy, right? I think a better investment of energy can sometimes be to say, if you want to, like, hey, when you asked me this, I'm just curious, like, what did you mean about that? Because that's an opportunity to actually get to know him. And he might come up with something that you and I could never conjecture, because he's a unique, individuated human in front of you, and he has his own reasons. So option number one is we ask. Option number two is we also just kind of let it go. And we're like, maybe it comes back around, but I don't necessarily need to attach so much time, energy, and understanding to understanding every nuance, right? Okay. What do I make of his words and actions when he shows interest but encourages me to go online dating? He got divorced 4 years ago and he feels he is not ready for a long term. So I think generally if a guy is encouraging you to date elsewhere, if that's how I'm understanding for the go online dating, I think that's a pretty good indicator that he's probably not your guy, certainly in this cycle, right? Because when a guy says that, I would tend to believe him. Like, he's not saying, hey, I want to be exclusive with you. You know, can you be my girlfriend? Can we kind of formalize this thing? He's actually saying, hey, go online, date other men. He's not wanting to make a kind of exclusive claim in a monogamous way on you in relationship. So I would tend to listen to that and take that kind of seriously. You've probably heard, if you've listened to me before in videos, I talk a lot about partner, lover, companion. And if a guy really wants to partner with you, he's going to tend to not say something like that. When he says something like that, it's more likely that he sees you as a lover or as a companion. And what that means is, you know, as a companion, it's more like, yeah, I'm still going through my divorce and I'm processing a lot of stuff, so I want you as a friend, but I'm not really here to make any commitments or agreements. Similar thing with a lover, right? If he's really seeing you as a lover, it's like, yeah, we can get together, we can maybe be romantic or even sexual, but I don't really want commitment and obligation to you. So when a guy says those things, I would tend to hear him and not try and wish it were different, not try and shift his view. I realized that divorce 4 years ago that's a while, but it depends what's really been happening in that cycle. And normally a guy knows when he's ready to step back into something. Your job, I don't think, is to try and persuade him that he's ready. I think it's much better to align with a guy who's already ready. That's my view. Thank you for the question. Penny says, hi, Jack. My ex came to visit me at my city after 2 years of not seeing each other. Then he left and said he was going to send me a gift, which will arrive next week. However, I don't understand, why is he sending me a gift? He doesn't call me. He randomly texts me. He initiates contact, and I take my time to reply, but he replies right away. How do I know what his intentions are? So I like this. This is like sort of multifaceted in some ways, but also this is the real question, right? How do I know what his intentions are? And we've got a few options there. One is that when a guy is really into you, often he will declare his hand at some point, right? He might be like, hey, I want you to be my girlfriend, or I want us to be exclusive, or here are my intentions for you, right? Even if it's not that specific wording, it's like, here's where I stand. Now, when a guy doesn't do that, we have a couple options. One is we ask him and say, hey, buddy, no, we don't mind my asking, but I'm just curious, like, what are your intentions for me, right? And you might have your own way of saying that, like, who am I to you? You know, am I in your heart? Do you see a future? Do you think of me seriously? Do you want this to be exclusive? So you can kind of ask those questions so that you get a read. Or you can sort of loop back to number one and say, I'll let a guy declare his intentions. And if he's not, I'll just assume that he doesn't have a clear intention that he wants a committed relationship with me, right? So the fact that he's kind of in and out, he's a bit random. He's not really showing up as, I want to convince you that I'm your guy. So everything that's not your guy, is not committed, is not taking it seriously, we just call that he's not your guy. And again, you can major a lot of energy in trying to understand guys that aren't your guy. I don't know if that's necessarily a good use of time and energy. It might be more to say, can you enjoy this connection as a companion or as a lover? And if you can, great. Or if that doesn't feel right to you because you actually want to reserve that energy for someone that it can go somewhere with, then that's what you do. I'm a fan of checking out intentions just because I'm a fan of, you know, let's be more authentic. Let's be more in the conversation. Let's not have assumptions. But if a guy isn't really giving you something that would imagine me as like, if I was your big brother looking at it and saying, this guy isn't really taking you seriously. He's not showing up consistently. He's not saying he wants the job. So let's mostly imagine that his intentions aren't that he's going to make this happen. I hope that's helpful. Maid says, why will my man never make arrangements in advance to see me? He rings me every day, but does not ask to see me until the last minute. Okay, so this could be one place where you are different than him, right? So it might be that you're a little bit more of a planner and he's a little bit more of a in the moment. And quite often planners and sort of in the moment people, they kind of attract because they can teach each other something, right? You have access perhaps to an energy that he doesn't, and vice versa. That's one possibility. Is just there's some differences there. Maybe there's an implicit request here from you, like, hey, I'd actually like to have more on the calendar plans with you, and you could make that request to him, like, hey, would you be up for that, or how do you feel about that? Now you guys can be in a bit of a conversation and see, oh, is this something we mutually can align around? Some guys, and I'm probably a little bit more in this category. And this isn't just guys, by the way, this could be anyone, is that you're more planned in your work life, but a little more fluid in your personal and social life, right? Like, so if you have a lot of like on the calendar structured time with your work, that you actually feel a bit more relaxed when you can go with the flow on a weekend. So that could be something. But it sounds like that isn't working great for you. So if he was going to be a good partner to you, he might need to receive some influence from you about this, right? Like, how could this work better? Maybe you could give him something that's an easy win for him. Maybe last minute for you is like, yeah, if you call and say, can we go out, in half an hour? But maybe if he called you at lunchtime and said, hey, can I take you out for dinner? That would feel good for you. Maybe you need it 2 days in advance. Like maybe you can be flexible, but can also find a way that's mutually win-win. The fact that he rings you every day sounds like he's into this. Sounds like there's some kind of consistency that's coming towards you. It might also be that one of the ways that you feel loved is really by having quality time. And for you, that quality time is kind of on the calendar and it's there. And for him, maybe that's not the case. So you could also include an exploration of love languages in case that's useful. Layla said, have I missed the front of this? I don't think I have, actually. Should I try to remain with someone who's emotionally cold? I feel that I understand him, but I'm not sure if I'm not losing myself in trying to undress him and stay. Okay, so I'm going to understand the essence of this question is, should I try to remain with someone who's emotionally cold? Yes, so many things I could say about that. One is you have your choice, right? When it comes to relationship, a slightly more realist way of looking at relationship, right? Not just the sort of the upside of relationship, but one realist way of looking at relationship is, can you find someone whose quirks and foibles and frailties you can live with, right? Because we all have them. And one way of thinking about relationship is, can you be with someone when they're in their less positive side, they're in their darker side, or they're in their frail side? And if you really, really can't, then probably that's not your person. Now, if you're saying this guy is always emotionally cold to you, that might be a deal breaker for you. That might be a deal breaker. But that would be a perfectly fine deal breaker. I'm curious if it's true that he's always emotionally cold with you, right? It might be that there are times that he is not connected to you and that feels emotionally cold, right? Like maybe he's buried in his work, or he's kind of stepped into his eye and he's going about his day. Do you feel emotionally cold with him when you guys are actually connected? Like if you're having a romantic dinner, do you still feel like he's emotionally cold? Is there any subjectification in there, right? Which means if you were doing the things that he's doing, is he being emotionally cold? I'll give you an example of this. Classically, it's sort of said, take it or leave whether this is actually fully true, but like if a man and a woman are in a car, let's say they're not necessarily in a relationship, but man and woman in a car and they're driving and they're not talking, that probably could mean more from the woman's side than the man's side, right? And again, this is gross generalization. You might have it the other way in your life. But it's sort of like guys quite often are happy to not be particularly connected or communicative because they're kind of like, they're just going about being a guy. And that's not the space. They're not in that kind of connected heart space. Whereas if you're not talking to a guy over a long journey, and it's not because you're listening to music or podcast or something else, it could be because there's actually something in the space for you. You feel disconnected from him. Maybe you feel hurt or rejected or something else. And so I'm just inviting some curiosity there, because sometimes where you feel hurt and rejected is the place for you to go to work on yourself, possibly with his support. But there's something in there for you Or maybe there's ways that you're warm with people, but actually you don't feel it inside, and you're being a little bit, making affection, or kind of making a presentation, or people pleasing, or putting on a positive persona. So that can sometimes be in there. Not every person has to be warm with you. Right? Not being warm is nice. We like it. Let's be it as much as we can. But it's unrealistic that we're going to be warm all the time. Now, we don't want to be cold all the time. But sometimes, like through this sort of experience, I don't know how you experience me, but you might think, hey, Jack's a pretty warm guy. And if you found me when I had my head down and didn't want to be interrupted, you might think Jack's quite a cold guy. Like, I'm not like, oh, come in, let's talk about this at length. I'm like, yeah, right. What do you want? I'm doing something. And as hard as that might be, and maybe that's my age of development, that I think is true for not just men, but a lot of us when we've got our head down and we're into something. So it's almost like, and I don't know if this is true of you, but forgive me, I'm kind of projecting onto your question. But if there's a covert demand that I need to be warm with you all the time, I as a coach would challenge that and say, it's great to be as warm and connected as much of the time as we can, but we also need to be human. And being human sometimes means that we're stressed, we're tired. And as a guy, when I'm stressed and tired, my go-to place isn't, oh, sweetheart, come here and rub my shoulders and make me feel better. My go-to place is probably, I'm stressed and tired. I need to be left alone. I'm going to figure this out. Or I'm stressed and tired because, I got this crappy problem that's happening in work. I don't need you to make it worse by trying to connect with me. I just need to be left alone so I can figure it out. A lot of guys, I think that's their MO. And whether we like that or not, I think we also just want to get to the reality of it, that I don't need to be warm with you all the time. It might be that I need you to not interpret that when I'm in my eye, or I'm focused on something, or I've got a problem, or I'm stressed, that you're taking that personally, or that you're seeing me as unwarm. Now, again, I don't know. This guy might be cold to you all the time and he's just not your guy. And if that's true, let's accept that and move on. But I know there's sometimes a space between men and women where it's like he's not being as warm with me, and therefore I feel these things. And we both want to help him be a bit more warm with you, but we also want you to be a bit more robust. And kind of notice, there's times and there's places that guys are going to withdraw, they're going to man cave, they're not going to want to be warm and connected with you. And that does not mean they don't love you. That doesn't mean they don't respect and appreciate you. It means in this moment, I'm stressed and it's not authentic for me to be really warm with you. I'm going to be a little bit short and sharp because you've caught me in the middle of something. So let's also create space for that. Another way of saying this is, let us both allow each other to be in our authentic experience. And if your authentic experience right now is that you're feeling a little bit closed and distant, that I don't necessarily have a covert demand that you need to be something else with me. And if I do, it's probably because I'm not giving myself permission that when I'm tired, stressed, or whatever, that I actually can be that with people. Maybe I sometimes tell myself I need to be warm with them. I don't know. I could be way off base with that. But I think for some people listening, this will be relevant territory. So I'm kind of universalizing the question a little bit. But good question. I appreciate that. Let's see where we got to here. Christina says, hello, I'm in a relationship, broken up months ago, still love him. What should I do to get him back? Okay, so a few things. One is we want to distinguish loving someone, missing them, put that on one side of the fence, and then getting them back. Right, so it's getting them back is my highest self genuinely believes or knows that getting back together is in my highest interests. And a lot of time in this space, we've got so much feeling in the love, the grief, the missing of them, that it can be hard to get a clear read about that. Right, so that's just one thing to throw out there. Is it definitely in your interest to get him back? Let's say for the moment that it is. Really what you want is a guy coming towards you, at least a minimum effective dose of him coming towards you. So what you can make is an authentic communication that says, hey, I really would like to try to get back together with you, or I'd like to repair with you, or I'd like to give it another shot. And I'm wondering if you're open to that possibility, or where you stand. You're not really trying to persuade him to get back with you. You're kind of stating clearly and authentically where you are. But we don't really want to be persuading him, because that's probably not the energy that we want to constellate it on. Now, if you know, hey, I left it on a really bad argument and actually I want to come together just to try and clear that air, you can do that. I sometimes think that breakups that break up on an argument aren't quite as robust as actual breakups when two people are kind of like, yeah, we're not triggered right now, and we're looking at each other and saying soberly, this just isn't really working for us. But I think you make an authentic and vulnerable communication. I miss you. I love you. I really wish you were here with me right now. But you're not trying to persuade him. You're trying to get him to reveal his openness to the possibility or the truth of where he stands. And I don't think you can do that much more than that. I think that's it. And if you can come to the table, great. And if not, you might have to let it go and move on. And if it comes back in another cycle, it will be founded on a slightly different energetic foundation. And that's actually a good thing. So sometimes you have to let something go fully and kind of move on with your life in order that it might come back. Not that every day you're thinking and fantasizing, will it come back? You're moving on, but you allow yourself to be open if that door gets opened again, but you're not the one that's necessarily, that's necessarily trying to do it. Queen Introvert, I'm curious on knowing if you've ever taken psychedelics with a partner. Just a fun little question. Thanks for all the information you've painted so far. Okay, the answer to that is yes, and it is fun. All right, let's have a look at this. Advice for begging a spark between two. I don't understand that question. I apologize. Oh, thank you for the super sticker, Queen Introvert. I super appreciate that. Thank you for supporting this channel and my work. Nice one. Thank you. Let's get to another question. If you've joined us recently, thank you. This is sort of like an Ask Me Anything session. I'm getting to questions in chronological order, so get yours in if you want me to get to it. And thank you for all of those of you who've asked questions so far. I appreciate them. And yeah, it's good to be here live with you people. I'm just going to see if I can shut this because I'm noticing. Is that better? I think that's better. I'm noticing I've got this kind of halo around my mouth. I think if you're going to have a halo, at least have it up here, but around your bearded mouth, I'm not sure that that's appropriate. All right. Yes, Europe is morning, basically. Yeah, totally. I get it. I'm sorry. I was going to try and get onto this a little bit earlier, but some stuff came up this afternoon, and I thought, you know what? I still want to go live, so I will do one sometime that's a little bit more amenable for you European residents. Karina, what resources do you suggest for improving emotional vocabulary? Sometimes I sit with feelings and have a hard time labeling my experience for better communication. Yeah, that's a good question. So I'm just going to type this into the chat box here, and then I'm going to try and flick it up on the screen and see if that works. So go right back down to the bottom here. Okay, so this is pretty simple. This isn't necessarily about like hugely improving vocabulary range. Just that often your emotional experience might come back to something like this, right? Mad, I'm angry. Bad, I feel guilt or shame. Sad, I'm sad. Glad, kind of joy, and probably the other one you could add there is fear, but this is just easy to remember: mad, bad, sad, glad. So if you're like, I don't really know what I'm feeling right now, I would say make it more simple, not more complex. It might not be that you can't find, the word is like, yes, I'm discombobulated or I'm flabbergasted. It might be that actually, let's just get to the raw emotion of this. Are you sad? Are you angry? Are you joyful? Are you fearful? Are you feeling shame? And that is actually a way into your emotions. And beyond that, I've seen some good stuff on Instagram where people kind of take some of these core emotions and then refract it through a whole set. But I think for a lot of us, we're not that complex. I mean, maybe I'd say I have some complexities as far as people's go, but there's also a bit like most of the time when I'm feeling something, I'm afraid or I'm shameful or I'm angry or I'm joyful. So I would say start there. And if you and your partner have a shared vocabulary, at least you know that when you're talking with each other, that's what it is. Now, the other thing I would look at is what's your sensational experience, what's going on in your senses. And mostly what's going on in your body, you can bring it down to pain and discomfort and pleasure and temperature, perhaps. Sometimes you get shooting, buzzing, electricity. But it's kind of like, can you just notice where your body is? Is there an ache? Is there a tension? Is there an expansion? Is there a contraction? Again, you can kind of keep that simple. Most importantly is to actually be with the experience, whether you can fully discriminate it in language or not, right? Because language is often, it takes us up into our heads a little bit. It can sometimes take us into the conceptual. And a lot of the inner work is about keeping us in the non-conceptual, actually keeping us directly in our experience of, well, what is here? What is going on right now? And I might just say, hey, I can't really describe this, but there's a pressure in my shoulder. And that's probably me being present. rather than kind of spinning out into something else. So that is where I would start. All right, what do we got here? All right, we've got some questions about English boys. I did grow up with them, so I'll see how I do with this. English boys like hiding feelings behind polite words and smiles. So need to say it's a bit disappointing. Is it normal in general, Jack? So I think what you're saying is that it's disappointing to you that they hide behind feelings in this way. So I'd say that that's a partial truth, right? In that there's probably something in this, and I don't think it's just necessarily the English or the only people that do this, or the British. To put this into other parlance, this is a form of disarming defense, right? It's a form of defense where I actually kind of minimize what the impact on me is by sort of talking over something or being kind of polite or saying something sort of frightful or jolly when actually there's perhaps a more raw experience underneath. So if you to take it outside of the Englishness, I would say, is this a defense that a lot of us, and I notice I have this, I don't think it's just to do with my Englishness, is historically, it was hard for me to say to someone just kind of simply and connected to my heart, this is my truth, this is my experience, or this is my boundary. Right? It would be much easier for me to want to stay in harmony and connection, and so minimize and sort of talk around the particular issue or problem that might be coming up. So what can be useful for any of us is to notice at least probably half the world has some propensity towards a disarming defense, right? Which means more harmony, less truth, rather than a dynamic style of defense, which tends to mean it's classically a more masculine style of defense, which is I tend to want the truth and I minimize my feelings, or I minimize the impact on you, right? So if I'm just like, I don't care how you feel, tell me the truth, tell me straight, right? That's probably going to be a more dynamic form of defense. And this more disarming form is like, oh, actually, I feel kind of angry inside, but I'm trying to be like, oh, I'm okay. It doesn't matter. Oh, we'll talk about it some other time. Oh, you're okay. You've totally been treading on my foot all the evening, but don't worry. I mean, it's a good foot to tread on, right? I'm kind of making it ridiculous so that you sort of see that that's like all harmony, no truth, right? Where I'm not actually willing to name to you the thing. So we tend to go in one of those directions. They're both forms of defense, and the solution generally is being able to be connected to our truth in our heart whilst we say something that is also sensitive that there's another human being over there. I actually benefited in some of my early years of living in the States, a few people just saying to me, hey, you know what? I think it would benefit from you in this culture to be able to be a bit more direct with people, and just sort of hearing that reflection, getting that permission in some ways. And then it's also sometimes a bit of an adjustment for me when I go and spend time back in the UK, just like, oh yeah, okay, it's kind of a little bit different culturally, but I feel like I can kind of do the pivot, but I needed to learn how to move a bit more into let's be a bit more real. And obviously a lot of my work is now about being more real and more authentic, so it kind of gives me permission. But it's not always easy. When I find myself in a cultural context where keeping face and being polite is valued above tell me your experience and what's actually real for you, that is a little difficult for me now. Like, I'm happy to navigate where I can and adjust to a culture, but it's also kind of sometimes feels like I'm getting a bit away from myself, and I could probably be more skillful in that. Is he playing or planning? This is a good question to ask oneself in a long distance relationship, especially. Yeah, I think you've got to ask tough questions in the long distance relationship. We already had the initial meeting that broke the ice, says Eukalena. It's a long distance relationship. In order to spend more time with him, I prefer spending the night and not to have sex to protect myself from having oxytocin go through the roof. Otherwise, I can mess everything up. Sure. I mean, permission to be human. I think a lot of people could relate to that. But just acknowledge if you decide that you're spending the night, but you don't want to go down that route, that might just be you're kind of requiring more of yourself. You know, maybe there's an option that you can stay in the area, but you don't actually have to stay with him. Maybe that would be good to honor the fact that we are not a couple right now, and because we're not a couple, I'm not going to be staying at your house. Maybe that's financially difficult. You know, maybe this coronavirus is kind of a weird time, but that can be something where you actually geographically markate, you know, we're not in a relationship. We're not going to be sharing space in that way until perhaps we really are. Layla says, should I stay with an emotionally withdrawn man? I've been with him for 7 months and emotionally I don't feel that we have connected. Should I keep trying? I feel that I can't get through to him. Yeah, I'm sure that that is quite a common experience. So again, you have your choice with this, and it sounds like you might need a bit more connection than is happening in this connection. And I think 7 months is plenty long enough for most of us to know that, right? So I would want you to explore that explicitly with him and just say, like, hey, I like you, and there's something that's true for me, which is I do want more connection than I experience in our relationship. And I'm wondering if you're interested in that exploration. And kind of see what you get back. There might be some data there that's just not been evident to you. There might be reasons that he's not willing to connect. He might still be metabolizing heartbreak. I will say this, I think all men at some times are emotionally withdrawn, near all men. So I don't have a problem with guys emotionally withdrawing. I think it's kind of useful and functional and necessary in some ways. Go cave up. I know a lot of women, when I say that, they say, yep, I need my cave time as well. But if I'm only ever emotionally withdrawn to you, that might be an issue, right? Certainly if you want a connection that has, richness and meaningfulness. So I would get curious about that. And it might be that you have to lay it down that this is actually a deal breaker potentially. And I think he can then really get it. If that's really not his thing, if he's like, yeah, I don't really care about being more emotionally connected to you, he might not be your guy. If that is the case, he's probably not your guy. But I think 7 months is a decent amount of time to kind of know if he wants to bring that territory to you, or if there's a reason that he's not, or if you have some expectations on what connection looks like, and that he actually does feel connected to you and you don't feel connected to him. So I would bring all the curiosity to that conversation. I think this is probably, Esmeralda, how a lot of people are feeling, that during this time they have fewer possibilities to meet someone. I did in a previous stream that I did, I was inviting people to see if you can use this as an opportunity to kind of master phone dating, right? A lot of times people can overinvest time in getting to know someone because they go for the whole dinner, and actually they would have been able to work out within 15 minutes on a phone call whether this is someone they want to connect with. Or there's people who get stuck in the perennial, textual intercourse, right? The guy that texts, but never really asks you out or does something. And so being able to say, hey, could we jump on a quick call just to see if we've got resonance? I think this is a time to really explore that and to kind of improve that tool in your toolkit. There's definitely more people spending time online dating on apps right now than previously. So why don't we benefit from that? Fatima says, hey, Jack, a man I was dating said that consistency for him is a date once every 2 weeks. In your experience, is that what a man looking for partnership would do? Thanks for your videos. Initial gut response is no. I know that I personally may enjoy certain types of connection, be more available for them than some guys. That might be true. But if a guy is into you, right, and he wants to see you and he wants to explore with you, get to know your mind, maybe get to know your emotions, your body, whatever's on the table, it's like once every 2 weeks probably isn't the level of interest that I think a lot of guys could bring. It's not even to make this guy wrong necessarily, just that I would say there's a guy out there that's going to want to see you probably more than once every 2 weeks, certainly in the stages of getting to know you, right? It can be a different thing if we're like in a committed relationship. Sometimes women come to me and say, hey, how can I kind of keep him interested? Or, we don't do as much fun stuff as we used to. But in the actual getting to know each other stage, I would say that that's not a lot. Now, it could be that he's very high on the avoidance scale, right? That he really likes his self-sufficiency, or he could be very much what we call a self-preservation type, where he's very kind of conservative about his time and energy and resources, and for a lot of women, I just think bluntly, that's probably not going to work that great. And there's probably someone out there that might want to connect with you more, or see it as your opportunity to actually, yeah, this guy's really in a kind of pretty lax dating orientation. Like, I can also really benefit from going out and exploring other connections and dating, and then seeing what happens, not from a place of I'm trying to hurt this guy, just like, oh, he's not really claiming you in a way of, I want something more meaningful. So why would you say yes to that? Sheza says, is it strange for me to want to be friends with my partner? I feel like a relationship would be strengthened if we became friends. No, I don't think that's strange at all. I think for a lot of us, that's a really deep and authentic yearning to want to be friends, good, real soul, nourishing friends to one another. I'm curious if you're saying you lost that, like you had it and you want it back, or if you felt like he's your partner, but you've never been friends. So maybe you have more of like a strong romantic love, sexual connection, but you don't really have so much of the companionship. Most of us want companion and lover and partner in one person. Now, that's not to say that there aren't other things that work. Sometimes there's all sorts of things that work. The challenge is when you have partner, but you don't have any of the other two, is that sometimes you're like, wow, we have all these obligations to one another, but we don't really have fun and we don't really have romance and we don't really talk as friends. Or when I'm actually a lover or a companion to you, that's like the true relationship, but we're trying to make it into partner and that's not actually really available. But I think absolutely. Is there a barrier to that? Does he not want that? Why would a guy not want to be friends with his partner? Unless the argument is if we become too friendly, we will diminish desire or depolarize. Like, I'm open to some of that argument. I think there's something to be mindful of. But I think there's very much a both and win that can happen there. All right. Ma says, Jack, triple exclamation mark. Thank you for your time and wisdom. You are welcome. How can I prioritize myself in a relationship without feeling selfish? I'm always thinking about him. Yeah, that's a good question. So I'm curious if there are things that you can do for yourself, right? So like, we might call them self-care habits or self-care routines. What are the things that really, if you are loving towards yourself, what are the things that you want for yourself, right? Are you able to go book yourself a massage, or are you able to take yourself for a nice stroll in a part of town or the country that you like? Are you able to run yourself a nice bath and put on some candles, or play your favorite music, or make yourself a nice nutritious meal? And if I'm saying this, if some of that's not really accessible to you, you can just think, how would I be loving towards someone I loved? And can I do those things for myself? And that can be quite an enlightening exercise. It was certainly enlightening for me back in the day to do that and notice, oh, that's a better definition of self-love for me that I can get simply. If I can do all these things for another person that I can never do for myself, that's something I might want to look at. And the language shift might help you here. So self-care isn't selfish. Self-orientation isn't selfish. Only ever orienting to myself, that's probably selfish. But if you're always thinking about him, I don't have that as a likely risk factor for you, right? Like, if you're always thinking of him, then you learning how to like switch that off a little bit and tune into yourself. You can practice 80-20, which I often talk about on this channel, keeping 80% of the attention on yourself when you're in connection with someone else, and just seeing what that's like, seeing if you can notice what's coming up in your experience. And to be honest, in the early days, you may have to burn through that feeling of being selfish, because that might be how it's kind of wired up in you currently. And you just need to keep practicing at that edge and just kind of notice, oh yeah, actually I can go and run a bath for myself, listen to some music and have a massage or whatever my self-care routine is. And I can still be really available for him so much of the time. So that's not selfish. The other thing is, you can look at people who can do this and not call them selfish, right? You can align with what's healthy. Perhaps you have a friend or someone who's always taking care of themselves, is lavishing themselves, goes to the spa every weekend, has a number of practitioners work on their body, is always buying themselves expensive nutritious food, is always taking the time to home cook meals and make sure everything's organic, or fill in the blanks for what would be true for you in your life. But find that person and notice what's positive about what they're doing, right? It's hard to not feel selfish if we have a racket that we're running on other people that calls them selfish when they do something that's actually taking good care of themselves, right? Or they honor an authentic boundary. If we think that's selfish, we're always going to be stuck inside that same prison. So it's probably a chance to relax possibly some of the views or opinions that you have on other people. Bianca, hi from sleepy Denmark, can't sleep, so I'm glad you're on. Awesome. Thanks for being here. I know this is not the first time you've been here, and I'm happy that we are interrupting the early hours for Europeans that aren't sleeping right now. Mate says, thanks for your answer. You're welcome. Isabel says, if he's already feeling insecure because he doesn't feel good enough, what can I say to make him realize that he is? Yeah, that's a good question. So I would say, with a little bit of sort of Jack, hopeful, kind of gentle bluntness, I don't really want you in the game of trying to be responsible for having a guy feel good enough about himself. You can be a great partner. You can support him. You can lavish him with appreciation, praise. You can reinforce healthy behaviors that he has towards himself. just make sure you don't take it on as I'm going to be his healer or his savior or his mother or some kind of archetype, which actually isn't what you want for a healthy partnership, right? He's not asked you to be that for him. And if he is, probably your relationship isn't going to be a partnership in a long-term committed way. It might be more like, yeah, you're going to heal him and you're like in the healer role, but let's be clear that's what you're doing. Where this gets difficult is where you're trying to be his healer and his partner. You know, if he needs healing, like let him find a therapist or a coach or someone that can help him with that. That probably isn't your role. It's very hard to make a guy feel good about himself if he's not taking that work on for himself. Now, if he's taking that on for himself and he's saying, hey, it would also help me if you could, I've got these affirmations and I'm going to read them to myself. And if you could just witness me for 15 minutes a night as I give myself these loving affirmations, great. But that's him enrolling you in his own healing. It's not you unconsciously taking it on or playing a role to him that might not really serve you. So my curiosity here would be, is there a danger you could be in an unconscious healer archetype, which is actually going to cheat you of the relationship that you might be capable of? And also just realizing feeling insecure and not feeling good about yourselves are definitely parts of life in my experience, right? That none of us is immune from at times not feeling secure or not feeling good about ourselves. Now, if that's habitual, like I'm chronically depressed, I need to get some help with that. And you can be a good partner to me, support me to get that help, but don't try and just be that help, right? The support there might be, hey, honey, you know, can we talk about this? I noticed that you're depressed a lot. I want to help you. You know, could we look at maybe getting you some support professionally? I think that might be a better conversation than I'm going to try and take that role on, because it might just reconfirm to you that you've got to be a giver in a relationship. You don't get to receive, that your job is to fix people. You need to heal people, when actually you need to turn inward and heal yourself, right? The healer, heal thyself. So for most of us that covertly get into contracts with other people that we're going to heal them, the move is inward. And it's like, what have I got to love and heal in myself that maybe I haven't yet taken a look at? And if a guy is that insecure that he kind of needs you always to prop up his self-esteem, he might not be your guy, right? He might be your healee, the one that you're trying to heal, but he might not be your genuine partner. I hope that's useful. All right. Thank you for all these questions and comments. Thank you if you've joined us recently for this live stream. I appreciate your being here. Give us your questions. I'm going through these as quickly as I can, and I'm going to get to them in order. So get them in if you want to get your question answered. Angela says, I met a man 1 week before lockdown and we're super into each other. We speak daily and decided to still see each other. He admits he has a hard time opening up. I'm afraid he's taking me for granted now. So I'm curious what has you feel like he's taking you for granted? Like in my view, as I'm just sort of hearing this, and obviously I don't have all the nuance, but you know, you met 1 week before lockdown and he's calling or you're speaking every day. That's a lot. I mean, for someone that you don't have a real relationship with, like that seems like he's showing up quite a lot for that. So what I'm imagining is he's taking you for granted because maybe you're opening up to him and he's not opening up to you. Is it something like that? You know, welcome to being a guy. That could be part of it, right? Even for those of us that perhaps a little bit more emotionally literate and expressive, like definitely can own that I sometimes have a hard time opening up, particularly if I'm not in the mood for it. And we don't really know each other, right? We met a week before lockdown. We kind of speak on the phone, but you know, I'm wondering if this is a little bit like sort of chill out on this. You don't really know what this is going to be actually until we get out the other side and you guys can spend some real in-person time. You know, maybe it's just a connection you enjoy it for what he is. If there's things that you're like, oh, I really sense that he's lying to me or that he's deliberately sort of manipulating me, maybe, but I'm curious. I'm not quite hearing that. And there's a distinction that I'd also make for people is, you know, we vary in the amount that we feel comfortable revealing ourselves to people that we don't yet know that well, right? So some people are like, oh my God, I was so vulnerable on the first date because I told him everything. I told him about, you know, when I got abused as a kid growing up, and I told him about how my ex-husband used to threaten me, or fill in the blanks. And it's actually a little bit inappropriate because it's kind of like, that's not real vulnerability. That's you kind of really, you know, revealing everything about your past. There's something about vulnerability that also has to do with this moment, right? What is actually alive and edgy and vulnerable in this moment? So I'm just saying that in case there's like, well, you've given him the download, but actually he didn't ask for it, or that that's not what he's ready for. Or there's a difference between being secretive and deceptive. right? Secretive is sometimes like, yeah, I'm not the person that just wears everything on my sleeve and just tells people stuff. It's like I might need to be in a certain space, or I might need to feel a certain connection before I open up. That doesn't necessarily mean I'm trying to deceive you, right? It's not that I'm doing that purposefully so you don't know something. It's just I play my cards a little bit close to my chest. And a lot of guys are a bit more that end of the spectrum than just blur his, what you see is what you get. So, I'm curious about that. But another way to think about this is no one takes you for granted without your participation in some way, right? So that's where we can really claim our power in these situations is, if I'm feeling taken for granted, what does that really mean? Does it mean I have questions I'm not asking? Does it mean I have desires I'm not honoring? Does it have boundaries I'm not naming or reinforcing? Am I overgiving but not receiving? Have I not asked to receive? So normally there's something going on there, right? When we feel taken for granted, particularly if that's a common experience that's happening in multiple relationships or in our histories, that can be your portal to your own wakefulness, right? That can be your own healing right there, is to be like, why am I saying yes to being taken for granted? Why do I just imagine that's someone else's problem? What does it take for me to bring it right back over here with myself and notice if I'm participating in that in some way? Because then we shift, right? Now we're not just a victim. Now we're a participant who has to take responsibility for maybe naming to someone, hey, even if it's blunt, like I feel a bit taken for granted here. I'm wondering if I can explore that with you, not from a place of blame, but from a place of exploration. And it may not be that the guy you've met, pre-coronavirus for 1 week is the guy you can explore that with, but that exploration is genuinely pretty enlightening if we're open to it, because we realize there's probably things that we've learned to do that aren't really serving us any longer. Paula says, learning. Awesome. That's happy space for me, is helping people learning myself. All right. Esmeralda says, I have big troubles talking to guys. I don't have a lot of experience with this, and I have difficulty to start a conversation. I'm not used to having guys just as friends and don't feel so free being me. Am I overthinking? What tips would you give? For instance, I like a work colleague, but no idea how to approach him without being too assertive. Yeah, I'm sure a lot of people can relate to that, particularly if your pattern is, it's not like you have an abundance of dates and it takes you a longer time to get to know someone, or you don't necessarily just kind of express your feelings. Generally, for most of us, the easiest kind of conversation is like a third party conversation, right? Which is like talking about something in the world. What's happening in the Democratic primaries? What's happening with coronavirus? What's happening with, a pop artist that you're into? What's happening in your favorite Netflix show? Right? That is generally easier conversation for most of us than starting with something that's more revealing about me and myself and what I feel. Right? So oftentimes we're just testing the water with people just to say, hey, I don't know, Biden, Trump, how do you think? What do you think's going on? Do you think this coronavirus is going to be a good thing for Trump ultimately or not? Or maybe politics isn't your thing. Maybe you want to talk about, hey, we're work colleagues. Like, what do you think of the CEO? Or what do you think of the company culture? Or where are we going? It doesn't really matter, because if someone's actually interested in connecting with you, you don't have to say it all right. Right? Kind of permission to be clumsy, permission to fail, permission to learn. If I'm interested in getting to know you and you come up and say something slightly goofy, if I'm really interested in getting to know you, I'm not just going to be like, well, your approach was goofy, so thanks, no thanks. I'm probably going to be like, cool, we're in an opportunity to talk. That might include the fact that you and I both feel a bit awkward, right? Permission to be a real human, that can include shyness and awkwardness. So I think you can just make a comment. Even when you sit down, I've traveled a lot in trains, like mostly in Europe, not in the US, in Europe. Someone sits down, you just say, hey, how's it going? Or, hey, grateful that the train's running on time. Or, have you been to Amsterdam before? It can just be whatever question. It just kind of gets you in and noticing, is the person receptive to some kind of communication? It doesn't have to be the right question. It's just sort of like, hey, human, I'm here. Do you want to talk with me? So I think taking the pressure off of yourself, and yeah, maybe you're assertive, maybe you're not. But the fact that you're not approaching him doesn't make me think that you're just asserting yourself all over him. So maybe cut yourself a little bit of slack there. And again, if the guy's really interested, he can be doing this with you as well. So you said, I feel I'm somewhat intimidating because I come over as very confident, sometimes cold, but I'm a heartful person as soon as you get to know me. Got it. So maybe there's a little edge for you there to not have to appear overconfident. Maybe include the places that you feel a bit shy, awkward, goofy, uncertain. But all I'll say is this: you can spend a lot of time sort of thinking about this approach. I would just encourage you to cut to the chase and do something, even if it's like you just throw something at him, or you know what I mean. Something could be silly, stupid, whatever. But that, I think, is better stepping into action, getting some feedback, seeing if there's anything real to be explored. I've known people spend days, weeks, months, years wondering about the guy in the office, and actually when they eventually broach it, there's nothing. He's not that interested. That's why he hadn't approached them. So better to be in reality than fantasy, and then be able to kind of move on in your life. I'm interested, says Queen Introvert, in knowing where a trigger comes from, how a trigger could feel like in your body, how to notice your partner is triggered, and how to make use of the trigger. Yeah, that's a cool question. That is huge territory. Most of us, I think, experience triggers in our bellies, partly because the belly center is the place that we tend to experience anger, and sometimes being triggered and being angry are kind of, kissing cousins. The other place that we notice trigger is I've gone into a habitual thought pattern, right? Where I'm like, you always do this, or you always talk to me like this, or this is always the problem, or no one ever sees me, or no one ever appreciates me. I've kind of become a bit unconscious, is often how we know. I'm in a reaction. I'm in a reactive thought form. That's one of the ways that we know that we're triggered. I can often experience triggered in someone else, also just in my body, just noticing, oh, the space kind of feels off, closed, contracted. Someone was close has kind of gone distant. Something shifted. What's tricky is that a lot of us either don't have the awareness or are too prideful to name when we're triggered, or we feel our own shame, so we're kind of protecting ourselves, or we feel anger and we don't kind of want to put it on the other person. So if you're noticing or suspecting that your partner is triggered, one aspect of being triggered is often we age regress, right? So we become a little bit more like our child self. So if in doubt, without being patronizing, you can just imagine, okay, in front of me right now, even though this is a 48-year-old guy or 64-year-old man or whatever it is, I might also be dealing with a 2 or 4 or 6-year-old boy. And how would I orient towards a 2 or 4, 6-year-old boy if I knew that they were really stressed or upset about something? So I might be gentle, I might be curious, I might really care, I might slow down, I might validate. All of those things are likely to be helpful if your partner is triggered. You don't necessarily have to name, are you triggered right now? You might be able to trust your own judgment. Notice, maybe I just need to slow down with them. Maybe I need to breathe with them. You can ask, is there anything that you need from me right now? Is there any way I can help? A lot of us, when we're triggered, we're so that we don't even know what we need, right? So I think making use of the trigger is about probably after the event, right? When I've kind of come into more regulation, come back to myself or back to the connection, is I notice, let me unpack that. Let me hit my journal. Notice, okay, so I got triggered because I didn't feel like I was getting enough attention, right? Or I got triggered because, he seems to speak his mind and I don't find it easy to speak my mind, right? Or I got triggered because he didn't offer to pay for dinner. And in my book, if a guy really loves a woman, he'll pay for dinner, whatever it is. So you kind of get down the headline, the essence of what went on, and then you get really curious about it. And curious about, is that true? Do I definitely know, is that true? Is there anything in my early life that picks up? Right? Maybe there was a previous partner or your first ever partner, or maybe mom or dad who did something. Get curious, because if it triggers you enough, normally there'll be something back there that it's related back to. Now, we don't want to get stuck back there, right? Sometimes people can tell me all sorts of things about what happened back there, but it's sort of cheating them from being really present in this moment. But we want to use what's back there to kind of understand, and then to see if we can kind of bring some love and consciousness to that and notice, does it have to be that way? If you're still triggered, generally getting more into your body is going to help you. Breathing, deliberate out breaths, slowing your nervous system down, telling yourself it's all right. It's okay to be triggered. We all have a right to be triggered. Doing our best not to act out from it. Basically, in the same way that I said, if you were with a 2, 4, or 6-year-old boy that was melting down in front of you, that might be your partner getting triggered. But what about the 2 or 4 or 6-year-old in you? When you were upset as a kid, what did you need? Okay, maybe you just needed to be loved and held and told that it's okay and be reassured. Can you do that for yourself? And the curiosity is, oftentimes when we are triggered, we think it's just about the other person, right? So, they never give me this kind of attention, or life is always unfair. And the learning is to bring it in and notice, is my partner just responsible for that thing? Is it just that they're doing a thing, or is it that they're doing a thing that I don't allow myself to do? And that's why I'm getting triggered about it, right? Because they are, I don't know, they're being really flirtatious, and I don't ever allow myself to be that. Now, I may not aspire to do that, but maybe we need to have a conversation and actually be in a better agreement about what flirting is or isn't allowed, right? Or, wow, they just seem to like spend all their money on these fun things and I don't get to do that. Why don't I get to do that? Let me get curious. Is it because I choose not to do that? Is it because mom and dad taught me to be thrifty, and so I really honor that value? Triggers can often have this flavor of, how come you get to do that? Or how come that's acceptable for you? And that's the invitation to go inwards and notice, is there a place that I'm not allowing me to be me? And that can be hard, because one of my defenses, and yours also probably, is projection, right? Is that we're going to project out onto the other person that it's just them. They're just doing this thing. They are just selfish, or they are just fill in the blank. And it might be like, what if my direction of development is actually being a bit more self? And so rather than running a racket on other people, you shouldn't be so selfish. I can actually come back over here and notice, maybe I want to be a bit more having my own back, and that might be more true. So basically the trigger invites the inquiry, where am I not whole? What am I not in touch with? What do I need to love and accept and allow more in myself? And that's the edge of growth. I hope that makes sense. I'm happy to take any follow-up questions about that. Karina, you're the best, Jack. My relationship is 10x with your guidance. Well, that's awesome. So thank you for being open to it. And if I've helped you in any way, let alone 10x, I super appreciate the opportunity. So thank you. Why will he not say he loves me when I feel that he does love me? Maid Marian. I don't know. It could be that your love language is words of appreciation. So saying I love you is kind of easy for you. It kind of trips out of your tongue, off your tongue. Maybe for him, that's not so true. Or that he's showing you that he loves you because he will go and shovel your car when there's snow outside, or he'll go and, I don't know, fix your hubcap, or buy something from the grocery store, or he'll sit with you when you're in pain. He might be in his way showing you that he loves you. And for some of us, that sort of stuff, if that's our love language isn't words, it's more meaningful to us. Anyone can say I love you, but will they sit by your side in hospital when you're ill? Will they pick you up from the airport? Will they go and sit with your family who they find difficult and be with you at Thanksgiving? That's love in their view, right? So love languages is a part of this. Another part of it is you may or may not be accurate, right? He may love you, and maybe there's a way that he's not quite there yet, or that's not the natural thing that he wants to say. So I don't think we want to be in too many assumptions about that. What I'm imagining is that you need to hear this, right? So there's a kind of desire that you have to hear that you're loved and for him to say it. And I'm curious if he knows that about you. It's tricky territory. I get it, because ideally you don't want to say, hey, can you tell me you love me more? You actually just kind of want him to volunteer and you want to hear it, right? But, again, I grew up in a bit more of a traditional British way. We weren't all the time saying, hey, I love you, I love you, I love you. I remember my first girlfriend, I was 16 years old. I remember going around her family, and they were, every conversation, every phone call, every end of interaction was like, love you, love you, love you, love you. And I was kind of, I don't know what I was bemused. I was mildly horrified. I was very surprised. I didn't know if it really meant anything. If I'm like, hey, could you take the trash out for me? Love you. I was like, I don't know about that. Like, it's just a very different way. It's a very different script. So all of that is not making anyone right or wrong. It's just saying we have different experiences. We have different upbringings. So I'm curious what you know about his upbringing. Has he told his mom every day that he loves her? Does he tell her, maybe his parents aren't alive? Does he tell his siblings? Does he tell his kids? Like, is that part of his way of being? And if it's not, you might need to have a little bit of time lag and kind of cut him some slack. And maybe over time you can educate him that if there's something that you really need, that you can kind of lead with that vulnerability and bring it into the conversation. but I wouldn't necessarily be making too many assumptions about what is or what isn't true for him. And I say that because I've done a lot of surveying recently, and I know that there's this perspective amongst a lot of women that men are wounded. And of course, men are wounded. Of course, everyone is wounded. But I don't necessarily think that men are necessarily always more wounded than women. I don't know if that's really true for me. It might be that they don't express in certain ways. It might be that they don't commune in certain ways. So all of that is just, I think there might be a little bit of misbelief that happens sometimes about who guys are or how they should be or how they should communicate. And we want to drop the assumptions a little bit. So what would it take for you to bring your vulnerability into this situation? And at some point, if it really hasn't happened, just to say, hey, I feel a bit insecure because I kind of don't know where I stand with you. And that might be a true thing to say. That might be more true to your experience than I know he loves me and he just won't say it. Because I don't know if you are necessarily able to discern that. Maybe you're highly intuitive. Maybe you can discern that. But sometimes we don't really know what's going on with another human being. So be curious. Anna Catamol. I like that surname Catamol. I'm just going to share this because my first teacher, when I was 11 years old and went to secondary school, the two people that oversaw us, one of them was called Dr. Catamol, and he was a very interesting and gentle man who taught us math. And I like that name. 2.5 years into a long-distance relationship, my partner rented a place near me. Due to COVID-19, that's put on hold now. I'm worried he could grow cold feet as we have a history of on and off. What do I do? Yeah, so 2.5 years, just to kind of give you credit, that's a long time to be in a long-distance relationship. So I think a lot of us would possibly find that hard. Ultimately, I've tried to make this sort of territory simple for people by using this language, is he your guy, right? So he is your guy or he isn't your guy. He is really going to show up, commit, go the distance, or he's not. And so I would probably be allowing the truth of this to unfold, right? Yes, you want to stay connected during COVID-19. If he can't figure out to be near with you, or you guys can't figure that out, that is really good information. 2.5 years is a long time to be in a long distance relationship, right? If a guy really wants to figure out coming and being near you, and it sounds like he was kind of there, but now maybe he isn't, it's like, I don't know if there's anything for you to do so much as to keep discerning what might be true here and noticing if there's enough of a showing upness to make something work. I'm not a fan of making excuses for guys. I'm a fan of giving guys months, not years. 1 to 2 years, I think, for most guys in nearly all situations is enough. Sometimes there's complexities, right? Like, yeah, but I have to go and look after my mother who's dying, or I have to take this job overseas. Of course, life happens, it has its complexities, but generally speaking, I think a lot of guys know within a year where they really stand with you and if they really want to move something forward. And if they're not, you might be like, yeah, but he's a bit more, he's slower paced, or he's a bit more on the avoidance side, or he's been hurt in the past. All of those things could be true. And we want to get with the truth of it. So I'm not too afraid of people getting into some of the tough conversations about where do we really stand? Where is this really going? Lead with your vulnerability. I'm not making you wrong. I'm just, I'm nervous, I'm disappointed, or I'm fearful, keeping it in your I statements. But I don't know if there's a lot more than you can do other than trusting that when a guy really wants to figure it out with you, he will figure it out. Right? When a guy really wants to figure it out with you, he will figure it out. And that might mean sometimes moving state, moving country, changing jobs. There's all sorts of things that I've seen guys do when they really want something. So if that's not happening, sometimes that can just be soberly good information as to why is that not really progressing in that way? Now, maybe you need to be flexible as well. I'm not just saying the guy has to move to you, but it seems like this is a long enough time that something should be happening. And COVID-19, who knows how long we're going to be in this. So I get that it's uncertain, it's weird, it's unprecedented times for so many of us. It might just be trusting that, I sometimes call this turn it over to the universe, turn it over to God, right? If the life, God, the universe, if you are wanted to be together, life, you, God, everyone, they will figure out. It will work out. Even if it's a long haul, even things will work out. So if that's not happening, sometimes we have to be with that as well, of like, why is this not really progressing? And am I trying to make something happen that isn't meant to be happening? That's the sense of what I get with that question. You know, if the history is on and off, what does it take for it to no longer be that? Is it that someone is not really committed? Is that you that's not committed? Is it him? Is it both of you? Do you both have exits? Like, oh yeah, if this doesn't feel good, we could still bolt, we could do something. Like, what is really going on there? And if necessary, get a therapist or a coach or someone to hold that conversation for you to really find out what is actually here, what are we wanting, where are we going? Because there's a lot of time to keep investing if it's not the thing that's going to actually be the thing you want to be in. So I wish you well with it, though, and I hope that you get the discernment that you need. All right, Elizabeth says, if a man comes back, what questions might help women discern if it's truly a new cycle or potentially start of something off and on? Yeah, that's kind of like $1 million question in some ways. Where it's not is it's going to be based on actions, right? So it's not going to just be both based upon a spoken reality. It's going to be based upon your intuition, what you're noticing over a period of time. If a guy is coming back or you're coming back together, you don't necessarily need to move too fast, right? I've seen it where it's like, yeah, we're really slowly. And over time, it's like he actually proves that he's different. I've had clients where it's like this, where it's like, yeah, we can just say he's showing up for things that he never showed up for before, right? Or he is prioritizing the connection in a way that he's never done before. So I wouldn't get too worried about the specific questions you do or don't ask. I would maybe just make it clear, hey, I'm going to be going slow with this because we've been off and on, and I'm really not looking for off and on. I'm looking for something that has commitment. I'm willing to give a little more time and energy to see if this could be a committed relationship. But don't expect me to just be kind of straight back into this. I'm going to take some time. I've been a bit protective of my heart. This is hard for me, and I still love you, and I want this to work. Something like that. And then you're just noticing with as much objectivity, with as much, friendship or professional support as you can to see what is really happening here. If a guy is just changed in words and not deeds, it can normally reveal itself pretty quickly. Or if he's having to try really hard, but it's not in a way that's sort of more natural and authentically aligned with him, that will drop off. So I would give yourself a few months to really just notice, is there something different? If needs be, you can make explicit to him the things that would matter to you if they were different, right? If that's not something that he's aware of, so that you guys have a little bit of shared reality as to this is what showing up is going to look like in this context. But I would give yourself time. Your intuition, knowing, and body wisdom can probably answer that question for you within a few months. Fatima, thanks for asking my question. You are welcome. April Skies 22 says, I've developed a friendship with a guy who lives 2.5 hours away. He visited me twice. Can't tell if he's romantically interested. We talk on the phone about twice a week for hours. Help. Yeah, I get it. These kind of things can be a little confusing where it's like he sort of seems like he's into it, but I don't really know. And couple options here, right? One is you wait it out and notice if you get some romantic interest come towards you at some point, right? Some guys are kind of shy or they're a little slow to activate in that way. Option two is at some point you ask and just sort of say, like, and you can lead with your own vulnerability, like, I like you. Like, I'm kind of into this connection. I would want to see more of you. I want to get to know you more, or I'm attracted to you and I'm curious kind of what's going on. Like, what do you see for us? Are you into it? Do you want to get to know me in that way? So maybe there's three options. It's like you wait and see, you kind of, you push the conversation, or there's a sort of third option, which is if it hasn't been revealed at some point, you just imagine it's not there, right? So if you're like, we've hung out enough and this guy has never showed any interest, then you kind of have your answer. And or you could step into that terrain yourself, right? Like maybe you guys are hanging out and you put your arm on his knee and see what happens, or you hold his hand, or you put your arm around his neck, or you move to kiss him, or you say, would you like to kiss me, or can I kiss you? And again, these things can be awkward. We have to deal with our fear of rejection, but the truth will out, so to speak. It gives you an opportunity to actually know, is this guy interested in me? So you greenlight him. You give him the opportunity to be like, wow, if you liked me, I'm kind of saying make a move on me, or I'm actually making a move on you. And if none of that has a romantic interest, he's probably a companion, not a lover nor a partner. The interest is probably not really primarily romantic, sexual, or partnership. It's actually, yeah, I want some friendship. I want some connection. And then you get to decide, is that something that I want to play with? The right guy doesn't become the wrong guy because you asked the wrong question, right? So if I'm the right guy and you say, hey, why haven't you kissed me? And I'm like, oh, that's a little difficult. You shouldn't ask me that. It's like, well, no, that's not, I can just say, hey, I'd like to kiss you. I'm not ready for that. Or, oh, actually, no, thanks for asking. I don't think of you in that way, but you're an awesome friend. Or I could be like, I don't even know if I want to kiss you. That's the truth. I feel a bit in and out because I like our friendship and I maybe don't know that I want something committed with you. And so I'm afraid of fucking up our friendship. That's often, excuse my French, that's like the truth for a lot of guys in that situation, is they're afraid of losing the friendship. But if I'm that afraid of losing the friendship, sometimes it means I'm not really available for something more anyway. You get what I say? It's like if the friendship is the main thing I want with you, and that's what I'm prioritizing, and I'm willing to miss out on having a romantic, sexual, or partnership connection with you, yeah, then we kind of have our answer there. But green lighting, I think, is underrated. And just to clear that up for those of you who haven't heard that expression, it basically means making it easy for a guy to advance with you. So you either say, hey, I would love to go on a date with you, or hey, I would love to get to know you more. I'm interested in meeting with you outside of work, or, you know, I would love it if you made a move on me, if you just want to be a bit blunt and direct. And mostly we don't do that because we fear rejection or we fear the truth. And so it's also a little opportunity for you to kind of put your back into it a little bit. I feel like I'm doing this right now. It's like, yeah, grow your backbone so that you're able to hear that a guy doesn't want to be romantic with you. And that's actually okay if that's true for him, that you don't have to be completely devastated if a guy you like isn't into you, right? And even at the time, it can feel like, oh, wow, we're going to lose so much, or now the friendship's awkward. If you're going to really be in a full-time partnership with another guy, you're probably not going to have this level of friendship with this guy, right? Like most of us, when the chips are really down, it's like we kind of want our person, and then we actually clarify the field so we don't have so many of these. Is he interested in me? Is he not? Could it be romantic? Or we're kind of best friends that could maybe sleep together, but we haven't, but we feel it. It's like that stuff tends to clear up, and you get much more interested in, are you my person? And everything else is kind of a bit irrelevant to that. So if I was a bit direct in my, do you want to get to know me more line of questioning, and that hurt you, I'm sorry, I can be available for the impact. But forgive me, I'm looking for a guy who wants to commit with me. And that's really what I've been the market for. And everything else is in another category called less interesting. And so, sure, our friendship might be altered or downshift. That might be disappointing, but like I'm creating space for the real deal. And if you're calling me all the time and you're not actually willing to like show me that you're interested or make a move on me, I don't know, man. What is that? Like, do you just want a perennial friendship? I mean, there's plenty of people you can be friends with. I'm looking for a guy who wants the job, who wants to show up, who wants something committed, who wants to invest. Is that you? If it's not, blessings on your journey. You're awesome. Thanks for being my friend. And forgive me, I'm going to be redirecting some of my precious energy and attention and investment in something that could go somewhere. You know, so it's sort of like, you don't have to make excuses for guys. If a guy can't have the confidence or courage to name what's true, that's in his journey. You don't have to play that game for months with him. You can just say, hey, I'm curious, forgive me being a little bit direct. I would love to know where I stand with you because it's actually confusing to me. Or I would love it if you would kiss me. And I don't know if you want me to make a move or if you're interested in that. And let the guy deal with your being too direct rather than he's willing to like invest loads of your time and energy in something that's not going somewhere, because that's not real love, right? Real love isn't, I know that you're interested in me, and so I tie up lots of your time and attention in our connection, but I know that it's not going anywhere. You just don't know that. That's not real love. All right. What do we got here? How do I know if I'm letting go too quickly? The longest I've dated someone after being divorced for 4 years is 5 dates. I feel that I'm being true to myself, but I'm wondering. I think you mean, so how do you know if you're letting go too quickly of like a connection, right? So you tend to let it go after 5 dates. So I'm curious. It might surprise you. I'm curious what is happening in you when you do that. So what's the headline narrative? And perhaps you could even let me know here and I can maybe pick up the question. But is it like I let this go because I'm bored? right? Which sometimes, for those of us that perhaps find our excitement through these kind of on-off, push-pull connections, we need to learn how to shift that a little bit and get a bit more interested in something that can stabilize and that's not just hot and cold. Sometimes we find that really exciting and intoxicating, but it doesn't really teach us how to be in a committed love relationship. So that's one thing that could be going on. The other thing is that you actually clear, like, I'm just not that interested in this guy. Like, if that's really true, that why would you continue to invest more time in it? But I'm curious if you've ever had a debrief with one of these guys of just like, hey, I'm not really feeling this. Like, what's your experience? Like, just kind of throwing it around a little bit. Most of us find it easier to, particularly if we're more on the introverted side, right? We like our own company. We find it easier to be ourselves with ourselves than we do with someone else, right? So sometimes being in contact with someone else brings stuff up like, I'm uncomfortable, or I'm awkward, or my nervous system's not regulated. And it can be easy to sort of put that on another person when the direction of development might actually be owning it for ourselves, that maybe there's something here for me to learn about myself that I don't show up in dating, or I don't reveal myself, or if I was projecting onto your question, the pattern that I've seen with this is like, yeah, it just wasn't that into him. Guys kind of bore me. It was kind of droning on. There wasn't anything kind of hot and heavy. And I find if that's the pattern, that sometimes it's hard for people to find a committed love relationship because they're almost not, they're in touch with the sparky, sexual, hot heat side of relationship, but they're not so in touch with like the bread and butter and broccoli, right? The fact that a lot of relationships require work and energy and investment and a showing upness over time. And sometimes it's lifting, you know? It's like, you want to be really fit at the gym, you got to lift, bro. You know, it's like, if you want to be really invested and have a relationship, you're gonna have to show up a lot more than most you and I think we should have to show up. I think, right? Is the reality is like, yeah, it takes time and effort. There's another human being. We have totally different languages at times. So just make sure you're not doing that from a sort of a protection mechanism, or like a sophisticated, no one meets my standard, so I sort of say no to it. But I see that you also stepped into marriage, so I don't know if that would be true for you, but that is a pattern that I sometimes see, that basically every guy I meet is disappointing to me. And that's like, okay, so there's some relationship with a standard or disappointment that's actually your work, that no one quite meets the grade, or no one's quite lives up to dad, or everyone is too much like dad, or I get to have this very perfect idea about what a romantic connection should look like and how it should feel and how it should go and how he should talk to me. But it's basically an idea, and reality is much more disappointing. And if reality is always more disappointing than your idea, you might need to drop your idea and get with reality, and notice if you can invest more into reality rather than just having everything be disappointing. And I may be way off base with you, but there's something in that I see for other people. That's why I'm mentioning it. Not the best head, eh? We'll probably put that back on. Thanks very much. Constance says, my boyfriend is 40 miles away. We see each other once a month. Is this frequent enough to establish a long-term situation? So I don't think so. Or let's just say it seems suboptimal to me. Like, you know, we generally say, I've heard it said, I've said, 2 to 3 times a week is how much we want to be connecting, or more. And that doesn't necessarily have to be in person if there's geography involved. But in order to really build something and progress something and also start to hit our issues, right? Because the danger when we only see each other once a month is we kind of have like a holiday relationship. So you don't actually get to see me when I'm tired, stressed, under-resourced, worried about how I'm going to pay the bills, struggling with work problems, got an issue going on with my sister. I've got the dog that needs to be taken to the vet. Life, right? Life happens. And actually, for a lot of us to really see someone, we don't just want to see them at their best. We actually want to see them at what? Their worst. You want to see someone at their worst and then say, hey, can I be in relationship with you? Right? That doesn't sound super sexy. Sorry if I'm kind of breaking some worldviews there, but it's like, we want to be with the light and the dark. And sometimes if I'm only seeing you once a month, it's sort of like, I can probably just show up as a nice guy dating you, take you on a fun date, we have a nice time, see you next month. But you don't really get to see the places that I'm holding back, that I'm afraid. You don't get to see what I'm like under pressure. You don't get to see what happens when we have a conflict. If I'm just seeing you once a month, I could probably put off a conflict for 5 years. But if we're going to see each other every day, you're going to see after a while that you and I have some conflicts. We've got some things that we've got to clean out and clear up and do different. And that's the hearty work of relationship, right? It's not super sexy, but that's like figuring out how to be with another human being is tricky at times. So I'm more of a fan of like accelerating that program and being like, hey, what about if actually we started to stay over twice a week, right? So you come to me and stay over. So we kind of see each other across 2 days. I come to you once a week. So we see each other across 2 days. Now we're seeing each other 4 days of the week. What happens then? That's what I would be curious. And if neither of you can put that effort in, if I was being blunt, I would say, don't know if you guys are going to put the effort to really make a conscious, committed love partnership work. Because I think it takes a lot more than that, you know? I think a real committed relationship is a bit more high investment than that, in my experience. Also to reap the rewards of it, right? Like from this slightly different perspective of, I want my wounds revealed. I want you to trigger me. I want you to show me where I hold back. I want you to show me where the ways that my mom didn't love me are still dictating my love life. I want you to show me that. If you want that, maybe you don't, doesn't sound super sexy, but if you want that, AKA real love, real waking up, real healing, then once a month probably isn't going to cut it. I did, in one of my first relationships was long distance. And it was sort of like this holiday thing because we'd go, you know, I was in England at the time, she lived in Switzerland. So we'd kind of go back and forth, but it couldn't really progress in a certain way because it's like we're sort of stuck in this holding pattern where we just go on holiday together, but we never really just sit down and do the normal things. And I think there's a lot that gets revealed in the more normal things. Also, if I was just being blunt, let's say I was coaching this guy and I'm like, do you love this woman? Do you want to be with this woman? Why are you only seeing her once a week? Sorry, once a month. Like, what are you doing? Like, you want the job at Google, but you're only going to work 1 day a week? Come on, buddy. That doesn't work. What's going on? Now, that might be a little bit provocative, but it's sort of like, if you want something and if you're precious and irreplaceable and, you know, he's looking at you in that way, like, come on, show up, buddy. Show up. That's how I would view it. That's what I would be pushing for. If my best mate said, I'm dead serious about this woman, I see her as the one, I want to marry her, but I won't see her until next month, I'd be like, come on, buddy. Some other guy's going to start showing up for her more than that. Or if that's you, why aren't you showing up for him a bit more than that? So I'm getting a little bit animated here, but I'm just like, yeah, this is life. This is real. This is your time, your energy, your investment. 40 miles. I mean, wow. In my world, that's actually not that far, right? I've had to pursue love across 7 time zones. Like, try doing that. And that means I'm going to get on a plane, even though I'm not feeling very well right now, because I want to come see you, because I actually want to invest in this relationship. And yeah, that's a lot of money. And probably from a flight shaming perspective, I shouldn't do that. And I want to make this work. I think there's that kind of like, are we doing this? And with the once a month, I'm sort of like, what are we setting ourselves up for? Why are we doing that? Now, it might be that you guys have super set up lives and perhaps, you know, you're a parent and he's a parent and there's all sorts of other things I'm not seeing, but I just imagine that there's more for you. And so I'm worried about the opportunity cost that both of you have versus the thing where it's like, it's real and we're in it and we're really doing it. Woo! All right. Krista says, as a married man, can you describe what it was like making a shift from just relationship to wanting marriage? That's a really great question. I think the essence of that for me is I'm done looking. I want this. Let's do this. And I'm not having to keep comparing this to like an alternative reality or what about this person or could it work out with this person? So like a different level of internal clarity versus perhaps historically in my younger days, I was a little bit more like, what are the options? And wanting to keep that open and just being like, no, I don't get any of that now. It's like, this is it. And sure, I'm human, I'm a guy. It's not like that doesn't bring up some fears or some questions, or part of me would like a little bit longer maybe to just be extra sure or work this out, whatever. But actually just sort of like, yeah, time of life, season, this person. It's kind of like, that's it. And I think a lot of guys, maybe it's not true of just guys, it's like you go from a bit more of a here perspective to a bit more of a like, yeah, just this kind of feels right, kind of know it, kind of into it. Not needing to overthink too much. And yeah, I think I'm a real fan of what commitment can just bring under something in order to create a container for the deeper stuff to happen that sometimes we don't even consciously know we've signed up for, but that actually that's where the real healing and the juiciness comes. So I'm a fan of that. I'm a fan. It doesn't, to me, I'm not coming from a traditional perspective of necessarily it has to be, a marriage or a particular way that gets expressed. I'm more a fan of what happens when two people basically say, I'm in, and I'm not just going to leave out the back door when this gets rough. And that doesn't mean to say it necessarily has to be in for our whole lives. There might be circumstances where in shifts, but there's this kind of orientation of no, I don't get to just, you've triggered me. I don't just get to say I'm done, right? It's actually I'm going to stay and I'm going to be with and I'm going to work with. And from the perspective of conscious partnership, I think that is a beautiful opportunity, even though it's a difficult one. And sometimes you'll be like, arr! But it's actually it's the person that you can't really run away from yourself with. That's another way of saying it. That's someone who's willing to stand with you and show you, here are the places that you're limited. Here are the places that you hide. Here are the places that you don't love. Here are the places you're still reproducing what happened with mom and dad. It's I'm reading at the moment, Get the Love That You Want, which is Harville Hendricks, Helen LaKelly Hunt. They're the founders of imago therapy. It's a very specific view of relationship. It's almost like marriage completes childhood, right? Commitment in a love container allows you to do the work to let mommy and daddy go in the nicest possible way, honor them, love them, and let's heal the things that happened inevitably where we didn't quite get what we needed, or we ruptured, or we weren't seen, appreciated, whatever it is. Let's do that work. And that, I think, is now the opportunity for a lot of us, rather than we're having to get married because, we need that in order to survive economically, or because everyone's telling us that's what we have to do, or whatever. It's actually from Maslow's hierarchy of needs, we're a bit further up the pyramid. And now some of this stuff around self-actualization has to do with, I need another human to do this with. And of course, romance, beauty, fun, adventure, children, family, all that stuff is awesome as well. Super fan of that. But there's a very specific opportunity that commitment can bring, that I think it's hard if I'm I don't know if this is my guy, right? Or one date, he might just be yeah, I'm not feeling it and I'm not going to be here anymore. I mean, I've been that guy in the past of yeah, thanks. This has been a great connection. There's a lot of love here and I don't really see it going somewhere. So we can't do that kind of work. We don't actually have to face the fact that when I depend on you day in, day out, that brings some stuff up for me. When we're casual, or we're kind of it could go either way, we don't really have to do that. It's more yeah, optional. I enjoy you. I'll keep enjoying you. You keep enjoying me. But there's nothing really on the line. I guess I'm a fan of saying something really happens, I think, when things are on the line. And that commitment is one way to experience something really being on the line. But thank you. I like that question. Hola. Welcome. Hi, Jack. My boyfriend never uses protections when we have sex. How can I ask him to use it? He said he never had girls pregnant without condom. Got it. I'm sure this is quite relevant to a lot of people. So the first thing here is, you get to have your boundary with this, right? So your boundary could be, I'm not willing to have sex with you unless you're wearing protection. That could be that's just the true and authentic boundary. You might be willing to have a conversation about that, but there's a part of this which is you actually fully honoring and valuing yourself, right? And if I'm a guy and I fully honor and value you, that may not be my preference, right? I might have a hugely strong preference for the experience of having unprotected sex with you, but I also get you get to call some shots, right? This is your body and I want to be open to your influence. And if I can't hear that, if I'm so astounded that you say, hey, I want you to use a condom, and I can't be with that, that might not be a signal that I'm really your guy, that I'm really going to look out for you and care about your experience and try and meet you halfway on things. So I would be direct. I would put that into guy speak. I wouldn't need to create a whole story about it. I would just be it doesn't feel good to me that we're not using protection, and I would like us to start using protection. Are you open for that? And in some ways, it's irrelevant what happened in the past, right? I might be look, I've slept with all these women and I've not used a condom. And look, I'm not a father, or whatever the story is. But a big part of this is you're you, and you have your body and you have your desires and wants. And can I actually hear you on them? Right now, I might counter offer. I might say, well, hey, if the real deal here is you don't want to get pregnant, what about if half the month we use a condom and we track your ovulation and half the month we don't, right? And you might be like, oh, okay, actually, I can say yes to that. If it's really more about not getting pregnant versus STDs, maybe there's some way that you guys can meet halfway. But I don't think if you are afraid to ask the guy, it means you're basically afraid to have your boundaries. And that will show up not just around sex, that will show up everywhere. And so I think that's the essence of this, is how do you have your boundaries? And you don't have to do it perfectly, right? You don't have to express it perfectly. You don't have to express it in exactly the right way. Where possible, you use I statements, right? I don't like this, or I don't feel, or I don't want, or it doesn't feel good to me. So you try and keep it on your side of the fence. But this is a really important conversation. And difficult conversations make relationships, right? We don't have to see it exactly the same way. But if I can never receive your influence or never have any curiosity, and I'm like, oh no, this is ridiculous. Like, I've always not want protection. I've never got anyone pregnant. You're overreacting. It's like, come on, guys, that's not fair. I don't think that's not how we really want to show up with this. But if you're sitting on something that you're not really able to bring to him, that might be that there's a bunch of you in there and that this is actually really a good territory. And it's a good territory as well, because if the guy wants to be having sex with you, like, he might have to get onto a slightly different program, right? If you're actually willing to say, hey, this is kind of like a little bit of a non-negotiable. It's not feeling good to me. We're going to have to figure this out. Otherwise, we're going to have to be sexual in other ways, right? Or we're going to have to be having non-penetrative sex because that doesn't actually feel good to me. Then he can wake up to that. And if he really can't be with that, I think you have your answer, that this probably isn't the guy that's going to invest his future with you in a way that's going to be good to you. But let's clear up your side of the fence first. Let's have you making requests, you naming your boundaries. Don't feel guilty. Like, if you want a guy to use a condom, it's like, there's nothing bad about that, right? That's what you need. That's what you need to honor. It's like, it's responsible. It's like, there's so many great things about that. So let's not have you feeling whatever's coming up for you there. You don't need to feel guilty or selfish because you're naming your boundary. And if that's what happens when you name your boundaries, great. He is helping you wake up, because he's showing you the places that you actually aren't able to honor yourself. That's the essence of this, I think, is being able to honor yourself and not being worried if someone doesn't like your boundary, right? If I've been sleeping with you ongoingly without a condom and you say, hey, honey, I want you to use a condom, I'm probably not going to like that, right? That's just realistic, because any of us, we don't like change. And it feels probably like we're going backwards. So I don't have to like that. But if I can never receive you and hear you and validate you, that's not very good. So all the power to you. I think it's an important conversation to be in. Isabel, you're welcome. Hi, Jack. In this job, how do you not treat your loved ones like patients? Well, I don't really have patients. I have clients. But I think I get the essence of this, which is sort of like maybe how to not want to heal or how not want to coach. I mean, I'd say particularly with perhaps my family of origin, they're not super in this world in some ways. So actually, I think I've been relatively good. I mean, who knows what their experience is? Happy to hear different. But I think I've been relatively good at not stepping into the territory where I'm not actually invited. Partly because I think I did a bunch of that in my 20s. And I kind of just realized it doesn't work that great. I get excited. I'd be the kind of classic, go off to the seminar, get the teaching, be like, woohoo, going to change this. Like, let's all gather around and do this big healing together. And I think there was a lot of earnest moves that I made that were good in some ways. But it's also realizing there's nothing so powerful as someone wanting to work with you, right? That someone actually has a question, or they have a challenge, or they have a problem that they want some support on, rather than kind of going around kind of, hey, I'm going to sort of interfere in your life and mess with your problems. So I think I got the download on that piece. And I also think in my 30s, I've become way more introverted in certain ways. So I'm much less kind of out there trying to feel and hicks, maybe heal and fix. I'm doing that more in the sense of the people that actually work with me, but I'm doing it less in the sense that I'm not needing to do it where it's not wanted. I'm not taking a burden like, oh, there are so many unhappy people in the world and it's my job to make them happy. I'm not doing something. I'm not doing something like that. And probably to bring in my own vulnerability, probably the edge is if there are things that I have a clear view on. and how to honor any place that I have got access to a perspective that's useful or that's sober or something like that, and how to really honor that. And I'm still seeing it on my side of the fence, and how I really honor that someone else or my partner is on another side of the fence with their own experience, and how to get with that and validate that. And sometimes if I'm stressed or ill or have had chronic sinusitis and my functionality is down, that's sometimes the challenge for me, is like I might be a little bit more like, my view is not so good when I'm a bit too attached to my view, and I need to be better at actually realizing, wow, there's so many different ways that we can experience this. I mean, I get subjectification because I've done a bunch of work on it, and sometimes I can still be a bit susceptible to it, which is probably why I still continue to teach it, because so yeah, I think it's a good question. I think also I probably have the benefit that my partner is involved in this kind of work and has a huge intellect and brings a lot of richness of perspective and life experience, and is an amazing facilitator and amazing coach. So it's sort of like, yeah, there's a lot of mutual wisdom that can get brought to that table, and that I'm a better man when I listen to that, and I'm a worse man. My perspective is impoverished when I don't take that on, and when I really get that, it's like, wow, yeah, like you're helping me see more. And I want to see, like, I love to see, I love to be clear. I love to have a true and rightful perspective, or include as many perspectives as possible. So I'm actually better when I take things on rather than be attached to being right, for sure. Yeah, you're welcome, Esmeralda. I'm glad I could help. I must say the time invested watching this video is really worth it, even as it's 1:30 a.m. I'm going to work tomorrow. Glad I reacted to YouTube notification video. Great job, Jack. Thanks. Awesome. I appreciate it. I like that this is a space that's helpful. Isabel says, I'm a psych nurse, so being a healer is innate. Yeah. I work on being a partner instead of a healer. Yeah, it's tricky. So for any of us, I mean, I can relate to that. Like, there's a healer in me, and it's sort of like finding your tribe that want to work with you in that capacity, whether the relationship's professional or as a nurse, and then really dialing it down in your relationship. And like, I'm not trying to pick a partner that I want to heal. I will absolutely help you with your healing, and I get that that is part of relationship. But the dominant dynamic here is not I'm trying to help you to love, or I'm trying to open your heart or help you be not your wounded self, because a lot of that is based on distortion, and it's very hard to stabilize a real relationship that's constellated in that way. So there can be loverships where it's like, yeah, this is really about one person mentoring the other, or one person kind of healing the other. But that was a bit of a black hole for me. Not even a black hole. That was just a bad hole or a rabbit hole for me back in the day. Is like, oh, when you eventually open your heart enough that I'm going to thaw and heal, then we'll have this awesome relationship. So it kept me safe because I was healer guy unconsciously, and it kept them feeling like, well, hang on a minute, what's really going on here? And it was all about me dating the future and not staying present, right? And we want to date the present. It's not like, oh, if your heart thaws enough, then you get to be with me. If you become emotionally literate enough, then you get to be with me. If you grow in these directions, then you get to be with me. If you ever find yourself saying those things, kind of caution yourself, because you don't want your relationship predicated upon some future growth that your partner has to make. Much better that you get with someone you're like, hey, I love you now in all your light and dark, in all the ways that you're whole and all the ways that you're incomplete. And let's do this journey together, but not that you have to pay some future price of entry that I haven't even revealed to you, that I'm constantly judging you against. That's a bit of a no-no. And, you know, I'm sorry to my former self and the people that I possibly inflicted that on. All right. Victoria, I love that you're so sane and not crazy. Meaning you're grounded in deep thinking, questions, curiosity. Yes. Thank you. I appreciate that you appreciate that. There's a little provocative part of me that's like, oh, is this the time for me to become cray-cray and say some crazy things? But I don't actually think that's real and needed here. And I appreciate what you're reflecting back. I'm happy to receive that kind of reflection, because for a lot of my life, I don't think I could have been described as so grounded. I think for a lot of my earlier years, I was much more drawn to the big thing that we can build together, or the big vision of what the future is meant to be. And it wasn't particularly grounded. And I had a hard time with people that were realistic, because I felt like they were always trying to ground my unrealistic vision. And I felt like the world belonged to unrealistic people that push boundaries and expectations. And whilst there's a partial truth there, I think there's something so powerful about being grounded on the spiritual path, particularly because it allows you to be with stuff, right? If you're always so into the big future, it's like you ignore detail, you ignore pain, you ignore problems, you just kind of whoa there. And I've learned how to be a lot more here. And sometimes I still get a bit stuck here, if I'm honest. And most of the time I'm able to be more grounded than I ever was. So still work in progress. Jack, I was getting breadcrumbed hard. I cut that crap off yesterday, hopefully for good. Thanks for the inspiration. Well, I like that you took your stand. And my prayer for you is that you get more of the connection and showing upness that you want in a guy. May that come to you. Queen Introvert, awesome. Diane says, hi, Jack. You may have already touched upon this, but what is the best way to ask what you and a guy you're seeing without actually asking that? I think you're saying what's the best way to ask kind of like where you stand with him, what his intentions are. And I don't know if I would want to add the last bit, like without actually asking that. You know, sometimes it's good just to be real with someone and to actually be able to stand in your adult and hear someone say, I don't see this going somewhere, and that you could be okay with that. You know, I've had really beautiful conversations with people where it's like, this is awesome connection. And actually, I don't really see it going somewhere, or they've said the same, and it's actually stabilized out as a friendship because there's clearly something in the connection, but it wasn't meant to be that. So I know I'm a fan of us growing our ability to give and receive the truth from one another, ideally with sensitivity. Because otherwise, here's the danger is that we're now dealing in kind of half signals, right? Or like misdirections, indirect communication. How do I really know if I don't actually ask you? Because you might say, he might say, I love you. And you're now encoding I love you for I want to commit to you and be with you, right? Or he might say, I want you to see other people. And you might be like, oh, he loves me, he's just not ready. It's like we can fill in so many dots. And I know this because I've coached a lot in this territory. It's so easy, I think, particularly more on the female or feminine side, to fill in a lot of dots and create a lot of texture where maybe it doesn't fully exist yet. So that's why, even if it's a little unsexy, I'm a fan of people saying, hey, and if I'm a guy and I'm in my masculine essence and I've got some access to my truth, if a woman asks me, hey, I don't know where I stand with you, I'm curious, could you enlighten me? I'm actually pretty open to that because it's like, wow, I've been having this woman in my field and I haven't clarified where she stands. And that's not going to feel good to her. Like, who wants to be the person who every day doesn't know, like, am I going to like make a move on them or ask them out on a date? Like, it's cleaner if it actually stabilizes as a, yeah, this is a friendship. That's where we stand. Or I'm actually really attracted to you, but I've got to let you know I'm not in a place for a committed relationship. So basically lovership is an option if we want it, but not partnership. Or yeah, I really see that I want to invest to see if this could go somewhere. It's like, that's really cool for you to know that. So it's like, I don't think we benefit as much as we think sometimes from kind of skirting around the truth of these things. Of course, there are situations that a guy might not fully know, but again, that's good for you to know. And if a guy doesn't really know for a long enough time, what is he? He's not your guy, right? So I actually think the clarity and the power is in being a little bit more direct in some of these conversations that we can. And if you're not willing to do that, ask yourself the question, why? And is it because your own fear of rejection? Is it because you now don't want some sort of awkward space? Maybe it doesn't have to be awkward. Just because I'm like, hey, I don't see you as my future girlfriend. Like, okay, now we could just either let it go because that's like all you're interested in. Or if you're like, well, that's actually fine. Thanks for letting me know. I appreciate you as a friend and I want to be your friend. Cool, we can play as friends. But do you see what I mean? It's like we sort of get to kind of like clarify the thing rather than, you know, oh, well, he left his underpants at my house and he called my mom one time and he told my best friend he was into me. And from that, I think he's going to be with me for life. Or now I think he loves me. Or it's like that can be so confusing. You got to read so many minds and connect so many dots. And unless you really love that intrigue and that's just so erotically, passionately, sensually turn on to you, for most of us, that means I'm anxious because I don't know where I stand, right? Most of us are like, look, I want to know, like, are you about to fire me from the job? Like, I want to know. I'd rather know than sort of sometimes just come in and then my rug gets pulled. So that's what's on the other side of this is like a little bit of a firmer foundation. And ultimately, if a guy never, ever steps into that territory and it's been months, probably not your guy. because he's going to want to secure you as his girlfriend or as his partner, or start building a life with you, or go exclusive. So it's like, don't be afraid of that, because that guy will probably be out there. And the longer you invest in something that's not that, sometimes it's just you're not investing in what could be a really good thing for you. So kind of maintain your power in this. Like, your time, energy, investment's precious. You don't have to know it from day one, but if you've given a guy enough time to get to know you and he's still kind of treating you just like an option, sometimes a guy needs to know you're not just an option, right? Sometimes a woman needs to know that from a guy, that he's not just going to hang around as an option forever, right? Like, there's power in these conversations. Like, hey, I like you. I would like to get to know you more, but I also have a life I want to lead. Like, are we doing something here? Like, you could clarify it within 5 minutes and save yourself weeks and months of investment. So I think it takes courage, and it might take overcoming the fear of rejection, both of which are really important in life generally. You don't deal with the fear of rejection by never being rejected, right? You deal with the fear of rejection by being rejected and taking it less personally. If you believe that there are some higher forces at play in any way, life, the universe, destiny, unfoldingness, essence, however you think of that, who you end up with is not just of your own volition in some ways, right? Sometimes there's a bigger plan at play, or who comes into your life at a particular moment. You can't control that. So it's like, if there's something bigger at play here and you're not my person, we didn't get those parts, you don't necessarily have to take that so personally. It's just, you're not my person, or I'm not your person. And by the way, if I'm not your person, you're not my person. I think that's kind of how it works. There might be some situations where you're like, I have this long time unrequited love, but sometimes that's as much about your own inability to detach and move on from the past than it is that was really the script that life wanted for you. It might be that they want you to know a little bit, like the longing and the pain of someone you want to be with and can't be with, and metabolizing your own frustration. Might be. But sometimes it's like actually finding someone that wants to play with you, and you both want to play. That is what it's about. So if you're not my person, that's cool. I'm not your person, right? It's sort of like it's a double bind. We both have to be in on the table in order for this game to be played. You want to play chess with me? You've got to come on the board. I actually do play chess, and if you do want to play chess with me, I'd be happy to play chess with you. But we've got to be on the board. We've got to be playing the game. You want to play soccer with me? You've got to come on the pitch. Otherwise, I'm just going to give you a commentary about I think they want to play. I think that team wants to play us, because I heard one of their players say that maybe they want to play us. And, they dropped by my training ground the other day and said they might want to play us, but I've just never seen them on the pitch. But I do think they want to play with me. That's not really a place to live your life from, right? Your place is to live your life from, we're both on the pitch. Believe me, both of you on the pitch can still be really hard. That's no oasis for a lot of us. It's like, that's the real work begins. Let's at least find something where we can both clarify they're on the pitch. So sorry if I'm a little direct with you. I don't want to cut something off prematurely. I'm not asking you this at the end of the first or second date, but we've been on 5 dates, 10 dates, 12 dates. You've known me for 1, 2, 3, 5, 7 months. I think you have a view of me, and I want to know, am I in your heart? Am I the one that you imagine a future with? Do you want to do something with me? What are your intentions? And I think that's a beautiful thing to be able to ask a guy, and to let him in some ways, in a classic way, be a guy and tell you where he stands. That is part of being a guy, I think. It doesn't have to be only the guy that does that. You get to do that as well. But it's like, kind of tell me where I stand with you. Otherwise, I don't know what my role is here. I don't really know what we're doing. Am I getting to know your mom just because you like to introduce your friends to your mom? Or am I getting to know your mom because she could be my future mother-in-law? Everyone wants to know where they stand. It benefits everyone. I don't think it harms anyone, other than I wouldn't be being connected to you in this way, or I wouldn't be being sexual with you if we took that possibility off the table. So if we've taken a future off the table, wow, maybe I now have to downshift this connection. But actually, unless you both want something casual, that's normally a good thing. One person being casual when the other person wants committed, that equals pain and heartbreak for most of us. So find someone that wants to play with you. And if I'm a guy and I can't handle that you were direct and being in the truth, that's probably my own work. That's my own disarming nature, my own inability to be with the truth, my own ability to want to keep the harmony, even whilst I know I don't want to be with you, right? And I know people, and historically I was that guy. I know people who are this guy to this day, where it's like, I could in 5 minutes probably deliver more truth to the person they're seeing than they've told them in a year. but that's because we're shying away from having that real conversation, and we're actually playing with people's hearts because we're letting them invest their lives in something that's uninvestable. Now, if you're the woman that's doing that, that's your own work, right? Why are you investing in something that you didn't actually know was investable? That's plenty of you in there. But as a guy, if I really love you, why am I letting you do that? Why, as a guy, would I let you build your sandcastle when I know it's just going to get swept away by the tide? That doesn't make any sense as like a real guy in his masculine showing up, telling the truth. And it might hurt you to hear, I don't want to spend my life with you. I'm sorry. Part of me wishes I did, but it's not my truth. That might really hurt you for a while. But is that not better than you building this sandcastle and I just keep watching you and I can't tell you the truth and we just keep going on dates and you keep investing more? That cycle just hurts people. And I'm sorry that I was part of that historically. So I don't think it's just a cut and dried that it's like every guy that does that is an eternal douchebag. I'm just saying we can do better, and I want to be part of doing better because that hurts people and it's not a great way to be in the world. Woo! Sorry, getting a bit preachy. Preachy McPreachy. All right, Maid Marian. By the way, I've got to say, Maid Marian, my sister just a couple of days ago, she sent me a screenshot of Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, right? So this is Kevin Costner, and I actually forget the woman that played Maid Marian, but this is one of my all-time favorite movies. Whenever if I have half an hour and I'm like struggling to find something on Netflix that I want to watch, I'm like, put on the last 30 minutes of Robin Hood, you know, where they like put him over in the catapult and they put him over into the Sheriff of Nottingham's castle. So anyway, the fact that you're using this Maid Marian, maybe it means something different to you, but that's quite sweet in my world because that's one of my faves. All right, Elizabeth, thank you for answering my question. You're such a help. Awesome, happy to help. Yvette, I'm having to work from home today, so I'm popping in when I can, but looking forward to watching the whole thing later. Awesome. Hope things are good down in New Zealand. I'm dating someone who was divorced from his ex in July. It's clear to me there are no residual feelings, but they share 2 children, one high needs with a rare heart condition. Excuse me. Now the ex has cancer. He gives me a lot of attention, but he's not ready for a new committed relationship. I adore him, but should I cut him off since he's not available for what I want eventually? Yeah, I get that can be a tricky situation. Again, I think a lot of people can relate to that. I think that you could do that. And I think you could do that lovingly to say, hey, I really love you. And I could really see a possibility of us having a committed future. And in order to honor that possibility, I actually am willing to kind of remove our connection right now, because I actually want the full enchilada. And if it's not with you, I want it with someone else. But I'm not willing to compromise on that. And I hope you get why I'm saying that. And I think that if a guy really gets that he can actually honor that. And then you go live your life. Maybe he comes back around. Sometimes, and I'm just putting this out there, let's just say more than sometimes, oftentimes what I've seen in these situations is that when the guy is still figuring his life out and he's like got a lot on his plate, but he wants companionship or blubbership, the person that supports him there isn't necessarily the one that becomes his like future partner spouse. I have seen that a lot. So I put that in there because I think if you go make this move, you really have to let it go and move on with your life. And if it comes back around in another form that feels like it's actually something to worth looking at, you can look at it, but you don't sort of live your life in waiting for that. And part of my being the right guy for you is also season. That's a big part of it, right? That if I'm actually not ready to be with you, but I don't get the certainty that I am going to be ready to be with you, then I'm not your guy. I just, it's almost like, hey, thanks for applying. I'll apply again in the future, right? The fact that you applied now doesn't stop you applying in the future, but we actually need to end this now and you just go into a future round, right? That's kind of how I think it works with that. So it's difficult to do, but I think it's also a loving thing to do, because trying to have someone give something to you that they can't, it's just another recipe for pain. So yeah, I wish you well with that. Ma says, Jack, thank you for your answer. I have a tough question. How do you define love? Do you think it's something to give unconditionally? So that's a good question. So I'm going to talk about this in a specific context, which is relationship and committed relationship, because that's where most of my work is. And that's, I think, the interest of most people who are, watching this. In the context of relationship, I think love is both conditional and unconditional, right? It's conditional because I've chosen to partner with you and I've not chosen to partner with someone else. And behind that decision for most of us is going to be some things around values, some things around worldview, some things around life path, some things around what we value. Do we want to be able to share a lifestyle? Do we want to raise a family? All sorts of those questions. So yeah, I can't just go out and be like unconditional about that. There are a bunch of conditions, right? For a lot of you that are watching this now, you're going to want a guy that's oriented to growth, right? If the guy doesn't want to grow at all, probably not going to be a good partner. You're spending time on your weekend investing in relationship education, and if he's got no interest in that, probably not going to be a good partner for you, right? So there's some of the conditions, right? If you consistently treat me bad all the time, and there's no way that we can see this working and getting better, I might not stay in for that. That's going to be a condition, right? That doesn't mean that we're not going to argue. Doesn't mean we're going to have conflict. We might hurt each other. We might even be terrible to each other. We might verbally be off the charts bad with each other at times. That might happen. But if that's the only thing that's happening, I can't play, right? It's a bit like, yeah, we can play football. You can foul me sometimes. We can kind of break the rules a little bit at times. But if we can't ever play by the rules ever, we're not even playing football, right? So they're conditions. The unconditional bit is how to and fully accept them for who they actually are, not who you thought they were, not your projection of who they could be, not your ideas of who they could be, but who they actually are. And that's difficult for most of us, right? A big opportunity of marriage and committed partnership for a lot of us is actually learning how to love better. And I don't think we talk about that enough. It's not just about, what can I get? And it's like, there are some limitations to how I can love, right? I can love you when you're being joyful, happy, positive. When you're being negative, pessimistic, and naysaying, I find it a bit hard to love you. I can love you when you're joyfully connected to me. When you're triggered, I find it harder to love you. I can love you when you're being kind and considerate. When you're being angry and short, I find it hard to love you, right? Most of us are going to have this list over here. I find it hard to love you when. And that's learning how to love more unconditionally, right? And that's the real opportunity of committed relationship, I think, and we don't talk about it enough. So relationship is a mixture of both. If you only love people unconditionally, mostly in my experience, it means you don't have your authentic boundaries and you don't have right relationship with anger. So most people in my experience who preach just love, light, and kindness, they kind of miss that life also has a dark side and there are difficult emotions and we need to learn how to be with them. So if you only love unconditionally, probably better that you go be a guru or have a spiritual community or something like that, because actually for most of us, the conditional aspect of being in a real love relationship is going to be what wakes us up, because there's all sorts of times when I'm like, I wish you were different. I wish this were easier. I wish you hadn't said that to me. I wish. And that is actually the thing that's going to grow us, so it's a wonderful opportunity. But I let go of as many ideas of I have about love and actually let life show me. Let life open my heart. Is it better to accept someone as it is, or to help him be the best version of himself? How to do both? Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, that's actually really in another sort of context and language. That's a very spiritual question, right? Because you could say the exact same thing about yourself. Just put him aside. Do I love myself as I am, or do I champion the best version of myself? And probably what you do for yourself is by default what you're going to be doing to him anyway. So I would encourage you to bring this question on your side of the fence as well. I think it's a paradox, right? We want to accept and love ourselves fully, be in full rapport with where we are right now. And we have our authentic desires about how we want to grow. And life is going to grow us anyway. Life is change. Life is dynamic. We're always, whether it's shedding skin or aging or new desires that come online or skill sets that we're growing. It's like life is dynamically unfolding. That's just, I think, a kind of almost like an immutable law of life. So how can I accept where I am now whilst I'm curious and open and desirous about where I'm going, but without being attached to it and also letting life show me? So how can I love and accept my partner as they are now whilst I also champion what's in their highest growth? And I'm a support for that, but I don't necessarily project just my ideas of how they're meant to be growing. I might also get with, well, how do they want to grow? How does life want them to grow? And it's almost like a slightly different consciousness, right? The consciousness that, in my experience, tends to use this expression, be the best version of yourself, has an idea around the striver self that is a bit different than most of my channel is about the authentic self. It's kind of like the move. It's like a developmental move from I'm always, sort of castigating myself that I need to improve and set more goals and be better and be the best version of myself. It's like that is a self that's striving. It's not necessarily a self that's at peace with this is who I am right now and life is unfolding through me. So I'm double clicking on that because back to where we started in this conversation, traditional, modern, postmodern. In my experience, the more modern view of relationship or the modern view of self is I'm a self that can perfect itself. I can be better, bigger, stronger, more skills, more languages, more loving, more whatever, right? Then there's a self that's more like an authentic self, which is I want to know who I am. I want to discover who I am. I want to have it be revealed to me who I am. And I don't take it as like a thing that I have to perfect in quite the same way. It's more like I want to include more of me. If I've been really melancholic my whole life, I want to know how to have connection with my joy. If I've been optimistic my whole life, I might want to learn how to bring in negativity and pessimism and metabolize them and realize that they're parts of life. So that they're slightly different orienting principles. And you might want to find someone. I'm not saying that one is actually better than the other. I think they're just different and they are different stages of development. And you want to find someone that has a similar view on it than you. But of those two things, I think the number one is the harder to do. Is accepting someone as they are, I think is mostly harder than trying to help them be the best version of themselves. So start there. Can you? And if you can't date and accept who's in front of you, probably not best to build your life with that person. Or to just realize, yes, we're all going to have some work to do on that, but it's more like some work rather than I can't accept anything about who they are, or he would have to have a better job, or he'd have to have a bigger house, or he'd have to have this before I'd even want to be with him. That's not a great place to constellate a real relationship. SF says, hi, Jack. In quarantine times, do I greenlight a shy guy I like who isn't very active on social media without leaning too far forward? He had a crush on me too in our teens, 20s. Awesome. Yeah, go greenlight. Why not? I mean, what do you lose? Like, you're not sharing your life with this guy. You've known him for a long time. He's kind of in your orbit. What do you lose? You might lose that you thought he liked you and he doesn't. You might lose that we have this sort of low-level friendship. But what you could gain is, oh, actually, we do want to do something, or I move on and put my attention on somewhere else. So I'm a fan of reaching out. Shy guys or otherwise. Let's particularly if it's locking up your energy and attention. We want to free that up. Hey, Jack, how do you get your man to open up emotionally in a long-term relationship? Yeah. So I'm just going to put the long-term relationship bit aside for the moment, because I think this question, how to get a man to open up emotionally, is such an important question. I think a big part of it is timing, right? Is knowing that there's a time and a place for a guy to open up more emotionally, which is often when he's not stressed, not working, and he's actually got his attention in the we space with you, right? When he's fixing something in the garage or he's solving a problem in his business, that's not really going to be the time. And that might be obvious to you, but I've seen a lot of times people get hurt because they kind of go, they ask and it's not actually available, and then they take it really personally. So get good at reading just when is your guy more and less available. And if needs be, you schedule and say, hey, I'd love to connect with you a bit more deeply. How about we have a gin and tonic Sunday evening, or how about we go out to the bar? And I know that doesn't work right now, but how about we, whatever the thing that would have you guys connect a little bit more. Might be going fun, go bowling, I don't know. But find a time where you're actually more in date, romance, presence mode than problem solving, business, life, stress mode. Step 2 is I think you lead, right? You notice that you might be better at this than him, right? You might be more comfortable being in your emotions, revealing them, right? Again, talking generalistically, most women are. They live in that place more than most men do. So you might want to share with him something about your experience, right? And particularly if you can touch into your own tenderness and vulnerability, I think that is the key to opening up a guy's heart, is that you actually get in touch with your own vulnerability, the places that you want to reveal to him. And it kind of leads the connection. It leads that part of the relationship. What you want to avoid is the experience that the guy feels intruded or invaded, which is a common experience for guys, for people who are more on the avoidance side, for people who are more isolators than fusers. It's a common experience to feel like, wow, you want me to open up kind of for you because you want to feel more emotionally connected. Are you wanting me to open up for me? That, I think, is the maneuver. And I think a lot of guys can feel that. I'll say this, I don't have all the stats on this. It's not surveys I've done myself. I have seen that a lot of women say they want their guy to open up emotionally. And what they actually mean is they want their guy to be more emotionally attuned to their emotions, right? So just permission to check what's true for you. Is it that you actually want him to be more connected to you when you're in your emotions? Or is it really that you actually want to be with his sadness or his frailty or his vulnerability? Because sometimes guys have the experience where they open up and actually kind of like him less because you're like, oh, I guess I thought I wanted you to be this vulnerable, wet mess crying, but actually now I don't want that, right? So not saying that's you, but just get curious about what do you actually want for him. And I think the practice, particularly if you could be mutually invested in this, is witness dialogue. And that means one person talks and the other person just listens. And they either say nothing, so it's either just silence, or it could be that you're allowed to make affirmation sounds like, yes, nod, I get it. But it's that. It's not, here's my view, or here's what's coming up for me, or, oh, I love that you shared that, or you're wrong. It's none of that. It's just actually being able to hear him. So a lot of guys, I think, benefit from knowing that they can really be heard and that they can speak freely, right? A lot of guys don't open up in part because they fear or they have experience that when they do go into more difficult territory or they don't get pushed out or they get drama. That's often what challenges a guy to open up, is this space really available? Like, are you really going to be a kind of a therapist in the quality of the listening? Or are you listening because you want something for you, right? That you want to feel more connected, which is not, I'm not making that wrong, by the way. It's just about being true to what the actual intention is. Of course, wanting to be more connected to a man's a beautiful thing. I want that for you if you want that. But it's like just really double clicking into your own motivations and noticing what is true for you. And then ask him in a quiet moment where you're good. Maybe you've had a nice connected conversation. Like, what has him feel safe to talk more? Does he want to open up more? Like, there might be some conditions that he has that has him listen more. Like, I know for me personally, I definitely want a quality of attention in order to open up certain spaces. If I'm going to start exploring something with you and then you're hopping off to boil the kettle or answer your text on your phone, or someone could call, or for me, that might just be complete jackism, but that doesn't really work great for me. I want to know that you're actually here, because if I'm going to unzip some stuff that feels kind of vulnerable and I maybe haven't even talked to anyone else about, I'm going to need some holding. I need a good pair of hands. So can you provide that? Can there be like a distraction-free environment? We're not multitasking. We're not going to be accepting a call. We're just kind of in the zone, dropped in together. And for some of us, sensuality and sexuality can also be a way of opening up, right? So some guys feel very opened by sex or by touch, right? So maybe there's a space that can be created. Maybe it's low lighting, maybe it's music, candles, incense. I don't know. You give him a massage, you help him get into his body. I mean, the other way into your question is, so if a guy isn't opening up emotionally, where is he? It's probably in his head. Right? So anything that you can do that gets a guy out of his head, which means more in what? More in his body, more in his heart. But I would say more in the body is probably the easier go-to. So guys are going to feel more in their body when you move with them, touch them, massage them, caress them, kiss them, make out with them, be sexual with them, have sex with them. Any of those things probably, probabilistically, are going to have a guy more in his body, less in his head. And the head, I think, is the barrier to really opening up emotionally, because emotion is the heart center, right? And for a lot of us guys, we need a little bit of encouragement to go there. You might be able to model some stuff for us by leading with your own vulnerability. What I wouldn't do is lead with a very penetrating question about his deep emotional experience if you've not revealed anything. So I would lead with an I, by maybe sharing some things that are difficult for you, or some places that you felt, places that you feel vulnerable. Again, feminine vulnerability is so powerful to a masculine man. So maybe you could turn that question around. Where do I have to be in my own vulnerability that he might want to open up emotionally? That could be a good question to ask. Thank you for the question. We live about 45 minutes apart. He works in the town I live in. Yeah, got it. So what would it take to close the gap of being able to see each other more times? What do you think of a man you're dating who never invites you to his home? He's been to my house for years. He always answers the phone when I call him. But sorry, then this is we live 40 minutes apart. Got it. Yeah, I think never being invited to his home could be a potential red flag. I don't know. it could be. So I would be curious about that. He's been to my house for years. Okay, so I would ask him about that. I would get direct about that in a loving way. Hey, I noticed we've been connected for a couple of years. You've been to my house 17 times or once a week for the last year, yet you never invite me to your house. Is there anything I need to know about that? What's up with that? Now he might just be like, yeah, I don't feel comfortable. He might have a complete bachelor pad that doesn't merit you putting your eyes on it, but let's find out, right? Or it could be that there's something else that's he's not really sharing his life with you. So the other question I'd be asking, when a guy is your guy, typically he puts you into multiple domains of his life, right? So if he hasn't put you into multiple domains of his life, what does that mean? Probably means that he's not your guy. So I notice alongside this, is it just the house, or is there have you never met his family? Have you never met his friends, his work colleagues? Are you part of his life in terms of some of the things he's passionate about, his hobbies? Just kind of notice, do you have some kind of role in his life? All right, I am going to pick up the pace here. How to determine when to stop talking in a convo so that you don't interfere with the person's life lesson. I think generally give advice where it's solicited. So when someone wants your advice, I wouldn't probably be giving unsolicited advice. Or if you are, I would preface it with, do you want some unsolicited advice? So you get buy-in. Otherwise, I think it's going to be way less powerful. Is it normal for men to prioritize their business over their girlfriends? Genuinely curious about this. Yeah, I think so. I think so. For a lot of men, if we say business or we say life purpose or we say mission and we just treat that as kind of one thing, I think that is most important to a lot of men. I don't think it necessarily has to be always like a 1, 2, 3. Like it just might be different areas of your life, I think a guy tends to think of his life a bit more like a pie chart than a connected whole. So it's like, yeah, this is my work life. This is my relationship life. This is my hobbies. And that pie chart can look different to different men. But I think for a lot of guys, yeah, they take that, what am I here to do, pretty seriously. And I don't think you want to be in competition with that. It's almost like if you're trying to be in competition with that, you've already lost the game to some extent, because they are, I think, to most men, sort of slightly different flavors of life. It's a bit like saying to a loving wife and mother, do you prioritize your kids or your husband? It's like, maybe they're just both important to me and I give them their right kind of time and energy. But most guys, I think, do need a part of the day, most days, where they are focused away from you on something that they care about. And that actually aligning with that is in your benefit, because a lot of guys, when they're fully invested in that and they've really, worked hard or done the thing or made the deal, that's when they then really want to connect with you, right? They feel kind of like, wow, like I did something, or I feel good about it, or I'm fully spent in that area of my life, and now I want to put relationship attention, or I want to really celebrate with you. I think if you're trying to interfere with that, sometimes you set up a dynamic where it's like you're kind of competing for his attention in a way that doesn't feel good to either with you. So either find a guy who's naturally got the way of prioritizing that works for you, or create a little bit of space, create some space for some desire. It doesn't need to be that you're getting as much of his time as his business. I don't think that would actually be healthy for a lot of relationships. Please share your thoughts on dating a separated man who lives as though he is divorced but has no plan to divorce due to the potential expense. Yeah, that kind of guy can be confusing. Yeah, I probably wouldn't be building my castle there. I think it could be okay to say, hey, if you really want to be with me, we're going to have to get this figured out, and that you maybe take your stand on it, because you might want to have a shared financial life with him. You might want to be able to make your own plans and not always having to think about someone else in that equation. So said differently, if the guy really wants to figure out being with you, maybe he can, right? I don't know. Maybe he needs to pull out of his IRA. Maybe he needs to take a side-time hustle, or maybe he needs to work some more hours or start a business, or I don't know. But if he really wants to be with you and the only reason that he isn't is because of that expense, I think it's hard to be in a financial partnership with someone and that it's just that. I don't think you can have a clean partnership energy with someone else when that's going on. That's just my initial hit on that. 2,500 miles apart. Wow, that's a lot. All right, Jack, I love your channel. What advice would you give to a single parent with a child if they want to successfully date? Yeah, probably to own it, right? I imagine that you love your children or love your child and enjoy being a parent. And maybe at times it's hard. And maybe that can be all part of the authentic communication and dating. I would feel no shame. I would trust that there's some guy who's going to love that and want to be there. And it might be the kind of thing that weeds a lot of people out because they don't want that. And that's fine as well. I wouldn't take that personally. I would just keep aligning with what is what you want. And there's plenty of single parent guys. There's plenty of guys who haven't had kids that love kids. So I would just be ruthlessly focused on what you want, and anyone else, thanks, but you need not apply. Great as usual. Great and real as usual, Jack. After working a few hours, we'll check in again soon. Yeah, I suddenly sound like, am I going to be contributing to the productivity drain in Europe here? Everyone's like, we're not able to work because of coronavirus, and we're watching YouTube at 2 a.m. All right. Been in a relationship for 1.5 years, seen some red flags, but having trouble deciding if I have too high expectations or if these are genuine concerns. Yeah, that can be tricky. I would invite you to not imagine that they're not genuine concerns, right? It might be that there's something that needs to be an adjustment, or there's a way of looking at it that could perhaps shift, or a conversation that could get you guys into shared reality. But I'd definitely be mindful of ignoring red flags, because normally there's something there that you're seeing, even if it's a partial truth, and even if your reaction to it is distorted, there's probably something, right? Like, in the previous instance, he never lets me go to his house. Like, there's probably something there, and it might be, and that might be it. But I don't think you get over red flags by just telling yourself not to sort of have them. If you've got too high expectations, I'd be curious as to what they are. The expectations that we want to have is, I want a partner that's committed and can show up and is willing to do some work. Pretty much everything else might be negotiable, right? Even if you're like, yeah, you've got some problems right now and you need to work on them, and that's fine. You are working on them. It's much more important, I think, that propensity to want to change and look at stuff and be real about it, than it is necessarily that you have to have all your kind of your life always together. But 1.5 years, that's a long time to develop some intuition. So if there's anything more specific, I'm happy to look at it. How not to be overly dependent on your partner. Okay, so there's healthy dependence and unhealthy dependence, and learning the difference can be useful. So we want to learn how to depend on our partners. It's really important. And we want to learn how to depend on ourselves. So mostly the answer to not being overly dependent on your partner is that you develop your own relationship with self, your own self-care, your own self-time, your own backbone. Trust yourself. Don't abandon yourself. It's just kind of almost coming into more healthy masculine in some ways, that you've really got yourself, and that then you're available for connection. And perhaps you also got friendships and families that, you don't put all your dependence in one basket. And probably realistically, it's also going to be something that's easier to work on with a partner. Like, some of that stuff is hard just to figure out, not in relationship. Probably some of your patterns will come up. And as you're doing that, you might notice, can I practice some of these other things? Sometimes you need to learn how to be more financially independent, right? And like really take care of yourself and your own income and your own work. Sometimes you need to learn how to be more emotionally independent, right? That you don't have to process everything with your partner. You don't have to bring everything to your partner. You might be like, wow, I'm a bit upset. Can I regulate myself? Can I maybe cry to myself? Can I hit my journal? So that kind of emotional self-sufficiency can also be useful, but we don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater, right? Dependence in a healthy way, super important to the right relationship. Love the format. You're welcome. Love listening to you. How to respond to my partner when he retreats. I've gleaned that he deals with stress this way rather than sharing his problems. I find it difficult. We're in our 50s. Thank you. Yeah, probably find it difficult to deal with me. I think a lot of us as guys, that's what we do, right? And so I think part of it can be not making that a problem, right? Just actually noticing, okay, that is a way of dealing with a problem, and sometimes it can be quite effective. So almost seeing the goodness in it as well as what you might not like about it. And what does that bring up for you, right? Maybe it's that you don't feel connected to him, or you feel kind of shut out, or so there might be some things for you to metabolize there for yourself. Like, maybe it's okay that not everything gets shared with you, right? Maybe you share things with him that he actually doesn't want you to share with him, right? So it might just be that you guys are also finding the right relationship. And then maybe you can make some specific requests, and you guys could have some agreements. Like if he retreats, that maybe, he lets you know he's doing that, or he gives you a time where he might be back, or he at least, texts you before he goes to bed, or there's some things that you can play, because it's basically how does, it might be he's a bit more in his avoidant, you're a bit more in your anxious, and how do you play well together? And sometimes we need to meet each other in the middle. But it could be a good opportunity for you to take things a bit less personally, or be like, cool, he's actually dealing with his problem. That's kind of responsible in a certain way. right? A lot of people wish some of their guys could do that more, right? And not just have them solve their problems. So we don't want to remove that way of dealing with stress so much as maybe start to cultivate some other possibilities that might also feel good to you, and that over time he might learn to trust them. At the moment, that might be his trustworthy go-to. I know when I'm really stressed, that's one of my trustworthy go-to is like, I like my own company. I need my own space. And I think a lot of guys can relate to that. So you want to align with what's healthy, align with the man cave, but maybe just have a few agreements that can also make it work more for you. And maybe you could practice doing what he does occasionally. When you're stressed, maybe you could go away and practice that and notice what it's like. Notice if there's something good about it. Because the more you have access to that thing in him, the less polarizing it will be between you. How do you suggest handling a situation in a long-term relationship when you have a suspicion of something shady but no evidence? I think you got to trust yourself. I think you got to bring it to them. We don't need to be, ideally we want to be with someone that we can trust, that we don't have to have evidence all the time, right? So this is really important territory for you being able to build trust to someone. So I think you could just say, look, I have something that's worrying me and I'm just going to put it out there, and then do your best to really listen and follow your intuition as to, is what I'm hearing true to me? You'll know whether a guy is telling you the truth. Like most of the time you'll really know. So trust yourself. I think we always wish there could be a chance with them. Someone gets these guys. Not quite sure what that relates to. I was talking to a guy and I deleted him. Now he's contacted me and wants to see me after the pandemic is over. I've reached out to him, but he does not put in much effort. Yeah, sounds like it's a bit cash. Maybe see how that one unfolds. See if he's going to invest a little bit more. If not, invest elsewhere. Get real and expect transparency unless you want to keep lying to yourself. Thanks for the sweet truth. Yeah, you're welcome. All right, I'm just going to see if there are any more questions here because I've got to go in order to keep my agreements. Is it true, Jack, if we show us insecure towards our partner due to past relationship, does bringing insecurity again and again make us unattractive? I don't think most people find insecurity attractive. I think that's true, but I also think insecurity is a fact of life. Most of us at times will feel insecure. So I think it's a question of balance, and it's a question of what do you do when you're insecure. If you can be insecure and make your partner wrong, probably 95% towards a solution. If there are certain behaviors that your partner does have you feel insecure, can you set a vulnerable conversation and really talk about that? Because at least they're not in the dark, that thing is different for me. But the fact that you're insecure isn't just your partner's fault, right? That's also your responsibility to become more secure. And if you come to them in a less blameworthy way, generally you'll get a better response. What's hard is when you're insecure, you kind of lash out a bit, and then you feel even less secure. Being there in the past doesn't feel good. All right. I think you've beaten me here. I normally try and get through all these questions, but we've just hit the 3-hour mark and I haven't gotten to them all, but I appreciate them. And if your question hasn't gone answered, you're welcome to post it under the video, and I'll try to get to it as soon as I can. I tend to answer as many of the questions under videos as I can. Because when I end this broadcast, the chat actually isn't going to get exported. So if you've made it through to this far from the beginning, I super appreciate it. If you've watched us after the event, thank you also for being here. I will look forward to being live with you sometime soon. And a couple of announcements. I will be launching a new program next month, so keep your eyes peeled for information about that. It's going to be somewhere between an 8 and 12 week program that will be delivered online, but we will be a mixture of deeper teachings from me and also times that we can come together as a group. Like this video. If you haven't liked it yet, please like it, and feel free to leave a comment beneath it. If you'd like to support the channel, I will paste the link here. It's just paypal.me/realjackbutler. I appreciate, thank you to those of you that supported during this live stream with the super chats. I appreciate that. And that's how you, if you're watching this after the event or now, you can go there and support the channel. I'm trying to do more of this style of work, and I'm doing a little bit less of some of my one-on-one work. So it makes a difference to me if you support this work, because it just allows me to do more of it and keep the ship afloat. So thanks very much. Thanks for being here, and good luck with the beginning of your new weeks. As always, I'm Jack. Thanks for being with me.